China. We are February 7th, and then we are coming back. And today, I am wearing this clothes, and it's matching very well with Karin and Miss. Uh, w- w-
然后呢，
so today,
还是形形色色的装，但是裤子换颜色了啊。今天的翻译奶
so today, our interpreters is not going to be heard on site. We and then
Every show. Hey, by the way, you should understand we're in New York City, in the middle of Midtown Manhattan with Central Park. And Miles Kwok is the best dressed man
In the
best
whole
dressed
city.
Best man dressed man in the whole city of New York, fashion capital. And once again, I have my green pants on. Man of the people.
我们现在有很多的问题啊。
现在班农先生
and Mr. Bannon, he is trying to tell me off with this way. But then Mr. Bannon has long hair. And Mr. Bannon has long hair. This is a very beautiful mane, and then I was so envious. There's so many channels of voices coming through. It's very disconcerting. Okay, so today, and Karen had changed new clothes. Your husband bought it for you, right? No, you bought it. Okay, so I bought the clothes for Karen. But please don't misunderstand. Okay, I only bought this wardrobe for her for the broadcasting.
Show.
哎呀，昨天
So yesterday, Mr. Bannon and myself and Miss Karen very honored that we had this great broadcasting in the February 6th, and we were answering a lot of questions raised by Luda and Sarah. And online, we had created great impact. So how great can you imagine? You may be able to see us online. Particularly Mr. Bannon, he showed such a charismatic image, and also Karen, yesterday she answered the question and she created a lot of impact online, particularly a lot of these young people, and they were really appreciate Karen's answer. But then we did not actually show there were 200 million of viewers from mainland China, and so all of that, a lot of the viewers were newly joining us. A lot of our friends, they were watching our program a lot. But then we have a lot of new viewers because they like Mr. Bannon and Miss Karin, particularly the younger generation. They liked her so much. And then Mr. Bannon and showed such a charismatic side that a lot of people were very appreciative. And also yesterday, do you know that after the program happened a lot of things I'm going to share them with you. So today we continue to chat with Luda and Sarah. So they can represent a lot of our friends to raise questions to Mr. Bannon and Karen. So now the first question would be raised by Luda. Luda, it's your time now. Mr. Luda. Where's Luda?
He must know Karen. He must know
Yeah.
Karen. He must know that Sarah has a better question, so he's hiding.
So
he's hiding. He's waiting for
He just
Sarah's
signed
first
out.
question.
他不在，退出了。
现在呢，请 Sarah 问。
So Sarah, you can ask your question. I can hear you, but I cannot hear him. So Luda, can you hear us? We cannot hear. I can hear some voice from Luda. No, I cannot hear you at all. Okay, we can hear now. We can hear now. Can you hear now? Yes, can you hear now? Okay, so Luda, you can raise question. I can hear Luda. I can hear Luda.
你自己可以控制。
Now, so Mr. Luda, you can raise questions, and Sarah, between Sarah and Luda, they can hear each other, but perhaps they cannot hear us. Okay, so he can hear us now. Okay, Mr. Bannon, yesterday you were talking about Amanda Bennett yesterday from VOA, and then in fact that it has created quite a lot of impact, and also Shasha Gong and Dongfang, they posted some Twitter messages, and a lot of us concerned about Amanda Bennett. Maybe she has stopped the interview from for Guo Wengui, and then but then they stopped broadcasting your interview. So in the U.S., is there any legal channel that can pursue Amanda Bennett? Mr. Bannon, can you hear me? Mr. Bannon, can you hear me? Mr. Bannon, can you hear me?
法律有什么样的行动
Mr. Bennett, can you hear me?
控制言论的这种做法？
Mr. Bannon, can you hear me? Mr. Bannon, can you hear me? Mr. Bannon, can you hear me? Now, okay. So the question, the question was that Mr. Bannon, the question was that Amanda Bennett, and then she did not broadcast your interview and stop Miles Guo's interview. So, is there any legal channel in the U.S. that can pursue Amanda Bennett and prosecute her or something? Can you answer this question?
It's a great question. This is about Amanda Bennett and Voice of America. And, one of the things a couple of things have to happen here. I think, number one, the media has to get onto this story. And I think it's incumbent upon us to get the facts out. Number two is obviously people in Congress has the oversight on the VOA and even people in the administration, right? And then number three is any kind of outside interpretation. I would think that's what's most important. The first thing is to kind of get this out and actually get the frame of the narrative. One of the things that's quite evident is that under the leadership of Amanda Bennett, the Voice of American Mandarin service is not really providing the service that it was set up to do, to be like a Radio Free Europe or a TV Free Europe that promulgates out to people in Asia and in mainland China what the truth is. I think one of the disturbing things, as we said yesterday, the fact pattern is very disturbing. The fact pattern that that number one, she was never really pushing, and you've noticed Mandarin Service doesn't really push the true story of what's going on in CCP. What they want to do is get access into China, and so they pull their punches on every investigation. They pull their punches on everything. Number two is that they literally pulled the plug on the live interview with Miles Kwok, and that interview is so important because of the time frame in which it happened. The time frame when it happened was in the spring of 2017. I think it was in April. And that was when this whole issue of H&A and its ownership started to come up. And that's really, I think, one of the first moments that Miles Kwok really became known in the West. Not just his impact he had had on people in mainland China, but became known in the West as someone who was actually speaking truth to power and bringing up these facts that for a long time the financial press over here, the financial institutions, the American elites had been in business with the CCP, with this kind of radical cadre. His whole expose, which started in the spring of 17 on H&A, which you got to remember, at the time, this is probably in the spring of 2017, Miles, the most powerful financial institution in the world, right? It was buying stakes, I think it bought a 10% stake in Deutsche Bank. It was buying other financial institutions. It was on a buying spree. That buying spree, by the way, financed by Western financial institutions and also by Chinese financial institutions. One of the key things in that was that how many of the world's elite were really making money off of H&A, particularly at that same time where Miles was actually exposing the fact that it had gone from something owned by the people in Henan or as a regional airline services company to a multinational conglomerate that I think you could argue had a value of almost $1 trillion, really before Apple and these companies became $1 trillion. So in pulling the plug on that, once again, Voice of America showed they weren't interested in it. They haven't had any interest in really pursuing those stories. And then when I gave them this 1-hour interview for the 40th anniversary of the Mandarin service, they didn't show it. And then the last thing was that they terminated Sasha Gong and reprimanded others who quite frankly were just doing their job and trying to expose the corruption of CCP. So the one thing that we're going to do is a full-scale investigation. One of the rule of law kickoff as we've targeted the kind of the waterfront of where we're going to focus on. We have a number of areas of focus. One of those is clearly going to be Voice of America. I think it's a disgrace that American taxpayers, people who think very highly of the Chinese people and love the Chinese people, are paying for this VOA Mandarin service that is really in cahoots with CCP. I have found in the U.S. government that there are a number of people, right, and some of those we were able to get out of government service that had too close relationships with CCP cadre members, this radical kind of cadre. And so it's going to be one of the biggest things that we do is in this year of action, 2019 being this year of action, one of the things we're going to do is very much focus on the VOA, on the Mandarin service, and particularly its head, Amanda Bennett, and other relationships she has. You know, she's married into the Graham family of the Washington Post, which owns the Capital and Education Services. We're going to drill down and find out all the relationships they have with China and all the business relationships they have with China. There's something that stinks to high heaven about this, and we are committed to get to the bottom of it.
Mr. Bannon had talked about VOA Amanda Bennett and the next steps action towards her. Now that we can see a very clear picture, and he told me about that behind door as well. In fact, that 2017 stoppage is really unfair, and also that she denied the broadcasting of Mr. Bannon's interview. So we are going to take action against her. So, Mr. Bannon, okay.
I bring up yesterday, and this is coming off of the president's speech. I want to go back to his State of the Union speech the other night, and then he was very upfront for the audience that saw it about these investigations that are coming after him. Yesterday, you saw a hole on the Capitol Hill, the House Intelligence apparatus. You saw a discussion here with the Southern District of New York, and NASA are going to start interviewing the Trump executives of Trump Tower. What I talked to you about, this pressure is coming on the president. Every day in the United States, you hear another, and it's the front page of every paper. It's the lead on every morning TV show. CNN goes on and on and on. And I'm not here trying to defend the president, okay? This is not trying to defend the president. But every day, you see nothing but the investigative apparatus of Capitol Hill and the U.S. government and the state attorney generals, and they're all focused on Trump. Right? They're all focused on Trump and the Russians, right? You have these massive scandals going on at the same time, right? With people like Higginbotham in the Justice Department and Amanda Bennett and just across the board. Anything related to China, you don't hear anything about. So it's just the question's got to be asked, and it's incumbent upon us to push this, is that how can you have this massive corruption, influence peddling, money laundering, government officials being bought off, other government officials not doing what they're supposed to. How can you do this at every level, from the highest levels in American finance to the CCP to what's happening over here in the United States? And you literally hear nothing about it, right? You hear nothing about it. Yet with Russia and Trump, every day, it's all you hear, nonstop. It's the equivalent. It's the equivalent of what I keep saying about the Russian who was poisoned in the city of London and Khashoggi versus the 500 in China, that you absolutely hear the Western media doesn't do anything. So I'm not a believer in coincidence. There's something deeply wrong with this picture, in that the media is just been critics of this. So this is why, just to go back, the Amanda Bennett Voice of America, because Voice of America Mandarin service has to be the gold standard. It has to be at the equivalent of what Radio Free Europe was, what Voice of America in Europe was. It has to be a truth teller, and it has to be fearless. It has to be fearless in its talking truth to power. And I don't think there's any time more in history, Miles, that someone needs talking truth to power than people, basic citizens, talking power to the radical element of the CCP.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. And also thank you, our interpreter. The conspiracy, that word cannot be used all the time. Okay. And Mr. Bannon, maybe he is going to laugh at the word conspiracy. And then also that the word is wrongly used. And then also, but anyway, Mr. Bannon, you talking about Amanda Bennett, the word rule of law foundation, that we are going to take action. That's for sure. I reiterate here. Miles Guo, we have 2 arms in the Rule of Law Foundation. I am the sponsor, but then Mr. Bannon is the chairman, and he's going to try his utmost, and then talking to the board of the directors, and then also that and then realize the promise that he made. He's going to take action. And Mr. Luder's question was wonderful. And Luder last night, and but that I had something unhappy about it, because he's and then he is actually he is actually broadcasting while that he's eating dinner. I cannot tolerate that. And the thing is that Mr. Luder actually and having a lot of food in front of him, so that but then anyway I saw him eating. I'm very happy. But coming up, I am going to continue our competition. Yesterday we had 3 versus 3. We don't know about this question, whether maybe he has 1 point. Now, Miss Sarah, the next question is from you. I like the camera lens today. The angle today is wonderful.
Miles likes beautiful shots of himself. So the cameraman is doing a very good job.
你知道我为什么？
And do you know why I'm so fond of Mr. Bannon? It's because that he always likes to encourage others, and then he always belittle himself, but then always encourage others, thinking others are beautiful. You cannot help to be fond of him. Now, can you hear us? Okay. Mr. Bannon, good morning. I can hear you, but a bit delay. So I'm going to ask you a question concerning about the Rule of Law Foundation. Nowadays, a lot of the CCP officials, government officials, being persecuted by the CCP, and their family cannot be allowed to go abroad. So how can we help them? And if they come abroad to the European countries, or now maybe that you can communicate with European countries, perhaps they can politically, they can give these government officials' family political asylum. Can you give me some answer for that?
That's a great question, Sarah. Thank
you. A very good question. Very good question.
For answering. One of the things that people should know as I met Miles is I spent a lot of time working on this populist movement here in the United States, the movement that's basically the foundation for a lot of what President Trump does. So a lot of the many of the people that love President Trump and support President Trump and have for years, I'm very involved in that movement. I'm also very involved over in Europe with a number of these kind of populist, nationalist, sovereignty movements of people that are trying to get their freedom back and it's the little guys movement there that you now see coming to power with people like Salvini or Orban in Hungary, Salvini in Italy, Le Pen in France, and it's really focused on these European parliamentary elections that are happening in May. One of the things I committed to Miles and to the rest of the people associated with the Rule of Law Fund is that I will be talking to people throughout the spring about this whole concept of special status, right, for people that are being really oppressed by the CCP, people that would need special status. And so hopefully the political asylum process here in the United States is continuing to work. Right now we obviously have this huge controversy about political asylum given what's happening on our southern borders. It's something that's trying to be worked out in a fair and equitable manner, but also in Europe, I think that and they've had a massive migrant issue there, but they still have political asylum. So yes, I think given, Sarah, the special circumstances of the oppression of people in China by CCP, and the more that we can get that out in the media, the more that we can tell their stories, the more that we can tell the 500, and particularly not just them, but their family members, their friends that are being oppressed. I think people in Europe will be quite awakened for this. Although our goal, remember, our goal at Rule of Law Fund, that's an interim step that we hope to do to protect people. Our goal is to make sure one day that there actually is rule of law in China, right? Because as I know from all the expatriates I know, every one of them that I've met here in Europe, every one I've met in the United States, a very high priority is that they would all love to get back to China and to be able to live in a peaceful and prosperous China where there actually was the rule of law and that they couldn't be intimidated by a totalitarian government.
Sarah's question was wonderful. Now, I think it is very critical. And Mr. Bannon also gave you a thumb up, so we are 1-to-1 now. Now, at the moment, competition is not great enough. Now, so Mr. Luda, can you continue to ask question? Mr. Luda? Mr. Luda, can you hear us? Mr. Luda, can you hear us? Okay, Mr. Luda, can you hear us? So there was some kind of a delay or some kind of a latency. Okay, I have a question. Huawei company, this is a question for Mr. Bannon. Huawei is being prosecuted by the Justice Department, and there are 20 complaints. And then also expatriate Meng Wanzhou back to the United States to be tried. And then there are the 213 of the Chinese corporation were being investigated by the Justice Department. We understand that. So from that, we can see that not only White House is taking action on the Justice Department, and also that some SEC also taking action. So I want to understand that in the wake of the Huawei, any other company would be investigated by the Justice Department, or any other company would have any legal action taken against them?
Yeah, I think this is one of the critical things that we're facing right now, is that this whole investigation in Huawei, and particularly its relationship with officials in the U.S. government, with politicians, exactly what Huawei's been doing, not just in the United States, but throughout the world. I anticipate, I don't know this, but I anticipate, Mr. Luda, that this could expand into a wide-ranging investigation. I mean, part of this goes back to the ZTE situation in the spring of this year. And in that regard, ZTE was kind of given a pass at the time, and one of the reasons was because of the high value-added jobs that actually people had in China, and the consideration of the president and the administration to make sure that things weren't done that could cause a bigger unemployment problem in China. So you have to remember, we have to balance this. Number one, there's as I said, a great fondness and a great affinity of the American people for the Chinese people, and they want to make sure the Chinese economy is prosperous and moving along. The other is this kind of CCP, had this radical cadre makes the system work for them and for nobody else. And I think that's where in Huawei you're starting to see it, particularly it's inextricably linked issues with the PLA. I think that's all going to come out. For the Chinese audience, I just want to make sure to reiterate, this was an extraordinary event. The Huawei really arrest, or the detainment of the CFO in Canada, right, was an absolutely kind of a breathtaking moment. And her to be then extradition papers put in and to be indicted back here. And then the implication there's going to be, a 20-count charge, and there'll be more because she is the CFO, I think, as soon as they get into the financial records. But yeah, I would anticipate that this investigation could expand, and it could expand quite rapidly. I think if you tie this back to the Higginbotham situation, which shocked people here in the United States, that a senior official in the Justice Department could actually have been taking $70 million, right, from the Jolo situation. It gets you that you just don't have any idea of how big this issue is going to be with Huawei, and we're just going to have to see. But I would anticipate, given the depth, if you haven't read the indictment, it's pretty it's pretty shocking that this could go on. You're also starting to see around the world where Huawei has made deals with other governments. People are starting to question whether that is really a Chinese intelligence network getting this government into the telecommunication systems and actually into military intelligence and other things. So I think it's this scandal is only gonna expand and expand rapidly. I think one of the key things people should focus on is the fact that Canada, right, which at one point looked a little wobbly, Canada has really thrown in here. So I believe, Miles and Mr. Luda, that this thing is only at the very, very beginning. It's going to expand quite rapidly.
Sarah's question and Mr. Luda's question, and very good. Now, and then the Luda is having 1 point. Now, Sarah must catch up. I see a lot of the posting from my friends, and asking Mr. Bannon's Rule of Law Foundation, can the Rule of Law Fund help a lot of the persecuted people being helped by the embassy? In fact, that there are some embassies in various countries can actually help. For example, like Italy or the Spain or Belgium or Brazil, these are the friendly countries, and then Mr. Bannon also know the presidents of these countries. And then also they're not only friendly, and also he is very influential of those countries. So that is why that Mr. Bannon is very against CCP, and those countries' presidents also against the CCP. So if there were really some of the government officials and also their family, if they were persecuted by the China, and then so if they go to those countries, would they be allowed afford political asylum held by those countries? So our work is continue. We are going to create an alliance so that anyone who were persecuted, then Rule of Law Fund can help you, and then we can help you to get to US or UK or the Germany, maybe applying for the political asylum. We can help you, and it's not like in the past, and but the thing is that at the moment it is very important. It is our goal to help you, but then the listing company, like Mr. Luda just saying, listing company lie to people and get money from the people, and then Rule of Law Fund also going to help those people, and then to get the investigation ongoing. And as we've seen that. But that we need to adhere to the law of the country to prosecute those people. Now, if you have information, and then you can tell us that how we can go against the CCP, that we can help you. So we can help you economically, and to support you economically. We have attorneys, and they are working a long time, many hours, in order to help you according to the law in the US to help you. So I believe that the rule of law under Mr. Bannon, we can have a lot of impact. So Venezuela, the last 2 days happened a lot of things, and in fact I talked to people. And then a lot of people said that I never imagined that Venezuela and Maduro can, and then also Chavez, they could actually have all this kind of a thing happening in Venezuela. And then in Venezuela, they and then Maduro has doing all that, and the army did not have any action. You know why? It is because there was civilian group, particularly they came from Brazil and the U.S. In a civilian. They have given them a lot of the messages, and then telling them that they are going to protect the people of Venezuela. So that is why that Venezuela, there are so many people and they are feeling safe, and that's why that they did not have riots and they did not have protests on the street. And also they are spending a lot of money for the police. And then also the mercenary as well, that a lot of a mercenary coming all over the world. But even so that they spend so much money, they were not able they, even with all that help, then the thing is that they were not able to actually completely creating the Maduro. And the thing is that so the thing is that at the moment we see that the Venezuela that they have this they have this president happening, but at the same time that the country is peaceful, so that is not having any great riots. So that is what we need to learn, the peaceful transition of power, and then also whatever happened to the government, that the people are safe, and so that is very important. But Mr. Bannon and the forming the Rule of Law Foundation, we need to go against the CCP, but at the same time that we need to take action, but we need to change our idea as well. Mr. Bannon, yesterday we were talking for the Rule of Law Foundation, and then in fact a lot of people are trying to make donation. In fact, that Japan, Singapore, and Taiwan, a lot of people and coming for us and telling us that they want to make donation. But the thing is that a lot of these donating account, they were not able to actually make a donation in the US. So, but I will tell you that if you make donation, that it is going to be used just for going against the Chinese Communist Party, and we will definitely use that, and then also that you will know where the money goes. And then I know that there are these and then so if you need to make profit, and that is not for the Rule of Law Foundation, but the thing is, the Rule of Law Foundation definitely is just going for the against CCP. Now, Sarah, you can ask question.
Something to Miles, Sarah, just 1 second. Let's go back to the
是不是要我问了？
the core
我
of this
是
is
现
that
在是
the key for talking not just to the U.S. government but for other governments, right? Because they're under pressure. You have to remember these European and South American countries are under tremendous pressure by CCP, not to believe any of these stories and not to believe any of this. And you take a specific example, what happened in France with H&A. When there was tremendous pressure to look the other way, and it was another, the guy just fell off taking a selfie, and maybe now they're saying he committed suicide, but there was no untoward activity driven by CCP. All of these governments throughout the world are under tremendous pressure by the CCP just to look the other way. So the key, and this is what will be the key going forward, in order to get special status or whatever you can try to apply for, is we have to get the facts. The truth here is very powerful, and the truth can't be withheld. So what we want is more transparency and more truth. And I think that's one of the things, and the key part of the action that we can take in the Rule of Law Fund, and what we will take is to basically collect the facts, do investigations with the top quality team we have here and other advisors and consultants, and with that, and with those facts, be able to make your case, right? Number one, to make your case in front of the world, and particularly in front of the world's media, and then to be able to make sure that government officials know what the facts are. The key, and for everybody out there listening, particularly people in mainland China, if you can hear this, the key is for us to be able to get the facts. Once you get the facts and you can build a narrative off of those facts, it's very tough, I think, for governments to look the other way, particularly given the oppression of many of the families here and some of the things that happen to the families.
Mr. Bannon had also in detail telling you about the Rule of Law Foundation's mission in here. I must tell you again to express my gratitude. And November 20th, someone called Mr. Bannon, and he is actually a general. He wanted to make a donation of $1 billion US, but in fact, Mr. Bannon had not seen this general face to face yet. But the thing is that this general actually showed us a lot of information but also I have met with 2 or 3 of the organizations going to make donation, particularly that one from Taiwan is one of the top 10, the wealthiest family, and in fact that they told us that they are going to make it into the will. The part of the estate is going for the donation or for the rule of law fund. Okay, so. And then someone also said to us that they want to meet with Mr. Bannon, and then also that they want to meet with Mr. Bannon, and they're going to make donation of 500 million to Mr. Bannon. And then the mission is to rescue the Xinjiang people. The Xinjiang people being persecuted, and they want to release them, they want to help them, and they want to meet with Mr. Bannon. Now, I answered to them that let's talk about that to our lawyer first. Now, because a lot of the donors, they don't want to just do things for themselves, and the people who work for them, who work for the rule of law fund, they're not working for themselves, they're working for others, they're trying to help others. That is what CCP would never do. CCP only care for their genitalia, and they only care for their own, their sex, and then so they are. But I think that we met with Singapore's family, 2 families, in fact. And in 1992, they worked with me before the Singapore family. And in fact, the Singaporean family wanted to make donation to the Rule of Law Foundation. A large part of the estate wanted to be donated to the Rule of Law Foundation, and then also that they want to make donation to the Rule of Law Foundation of the vehicle fleets that they have, like that each of the Mercedes-Benz costs $3 million, but they want to donate it to the Rule of Law Foundation. So we have a lot of the resources, but then the thing is that Venezuela, they can have this peaceful situation, even though that the government is Maduro, this dictator government. But the thing is, a lot of people do things to try to stabilize the country and trying to stabilize civilians and helping with the people. So that is why what we're going to learn, and that is what we're going to do in the future. Now, Sarah, your question. Time for you to raise question. We have some latency, so we need to wait for her. Sarah, can you hear us? Okay, so I can ask question. So thank you, Miles. Thank you, Mr. Bannon. I'm going to ask question concerning with the Rule of Law Foundation. Now, Mr. Wang Qishan, he is in Germany and Europe and in the US. He is a most influential figure, and yet he has already privately, store money, and then those money belong to the 1.4 billion of the people. So do you think that we can find those money out, and then if people provide information for you to find those money, would those people being rewarded? And also a lot of a listing company in the US and from China, and the thing is that those are fake information. Do you think that the US company is going to investigate those are fake information provided by the Chinese company as well?
Boy, that's a great question. Let's start with the first part of that. The first part of that is I think it's very important. I think one of the central parts of the Rule of Law Fund is about the rule of law and about how that would be hopefully implemented in China and to hold officials to that. One of the keys to the rule of law is to actually find out, I think, and part of the investigations, that's why the H&A investigation, the continuation of that is so important, is that it is what actually had the senior members of the CCP stolen from the Chinese people, and particularly what have they tried to money launder out into the West, into the United States, into Europe, into other parts of Asia, Australia. How have they tried to get this money out of the country? which are really, it's the Chinese people's money. How did that money get out? Where does it go? What's the ownership? I think you see in the H&A investigation as the beginning, you're seeing a very thorough and systematic. What Miles did was a very thorough and systematic breakdown of H&A as a company, a $1 trillion company, to really take it apart, actually see what the ownership structure is, see how that ownership structure took place, and see how kind of the cash flowed back to certain people. That's why in the H&A case, what Miles did was basically under what's called discovery in the U.S. court system, actually go subpoena, right? He wanted their books and records. He wanted all the analysis that was done. He wanted all the presentations were done. He wanted to see the phone records, etc. He wanted to see a whole bunch of detail that actually tied, right, CCP cadre senior leadership to the management of H&A, and then to tie it to the financial institutions of the West, both the commercial banks that lend them the money and the investment banks that raise the money, and ultimately the hedge funds that made money off it. This whole network, this kind of financial apparatus here with the political apparatus in China, that whole apparatus working together as one, they work together as one, essentially to steal the Chinese people's money, right, and use the working people's money in the United States to finance it, to steal the working people in China's money so that it went to both the elite, the CCP, and the elite on Wall Street. People have to understand that are watching this broadcast, that is what the scam is. It's to use the people's money here, the pension funds and what's in the banks, to finance the basically robbing of the Chinese people's hard-earned living. That's the outrage here. That's one of the key things that we're going to try to do, and we commit to do at the Rule of Law Fund, is to take some specific examples of where this is happening and to bring it to light. I will tell you, if we continue on in the H&A investigation, and that investigation leads where we think it's going to be, I happen to believe that they're going to be criminal charges. We're just doing it in a lawsuit. So we have two things in the United States. One is civil, and the other is criminal. Criminal is done by the state or the local officials, law enforcement, and the civil is when people sue each other. Miles's whole effort in the Rule of Law Fund's effort is now in the civil area to get that information. I happen to believe, and this is just my personal belief, that as more information comes to light, you're going to see it go up to the criminal aspect of this. And so yes, this is one of the Rule of Law Fund, one of the central parts of it is to investigate these transactions that were financed by U.S. Financial institutions, U.S. companies with the Chinese, to understand the cash flows, to see how the money was laundered, who owned it, et cetera, and then to actually take it to the next level and give it to the appropriate authorities.
Mr. Bannon, answering Miss Sarah's question, very good. So I think that this is already like a tie. Okay, I can't remember exactly how many points, but Mr. Luder and then Mr. Luder's question is also very good. And then Miss Sarah asked the question, and Mr. Bannon actually forget some questions, probably because Sarah is too beautiful, right? And then so that he did not, he forgot some of the questions. So, and then he only thinking about that Rule of Law Fund, right? Now, but it is a great question. So let me reiterate, for the donation of Rule of Law Foundation, I see a lot of the messages. They are talking about that Mr. Bannon is magnificent, and also that with a great mind, and it's a very brave and courageous. It's like Wang Yangming, our philosopher. Now, let me tell you again about the donation. Now, maybe Mr. Bannon is not going. Maybe you just listen to me first. So you see that even now, but the thing is that if you have $2,000, $3,000, then you should not just think about donation, and then you should just thinking about your own livelihood first. What kind of people should make donation? If you have spare money, and if you donate the spare money then you care where the money goes, and then you make this donation, you feel good, then you should make that donation. Now the thing is that you need to understand where the money goes, right? It's not like that you should use your own money to make donation. If that is the money that you make and for your own livelihood, if you make $2,000 a month, that you should not make that donation. Like for example, like Guo Baosheng is such a scam con man, and then he is actually trying to cheat money out of people, and then he's cheating money from the people who are making money for themselves. Okay, so you must have seen the document that our court case with Guo Baosheng, right? And we really don't encourage you to donate money if that money is actually your own money that for your own livelihoods to support your own life. So I am telling you that you should make donation only if you have spare money, and only Sarah, such a kind person, would actually donate money to Guo Baosheng. Guo Baosheng is such a con man. You must be wiser. So I'm telling all of us here, comrades, if you have spare money, then you can make donation. But if you don't have spare money, don't make that donation. If you spare money like several hundreds of $1 million, yes, make that donation to us. Okay, so. But the thing is that if you make the donation, even make the donation, if somebody is spending that money and then it's not affecting your life, and that's okay, you should make that donation. Okay. Now I thank you very much, and now we are going to ask Luda to ask the next question. We know that Luda has some latency. We're going to wait for him. And Mr. Luda probably go and take a skiving time to go and eat something. And so, but the thing is that we wait for him.
我想问一下，刚才
Mr. Bannon, when Miles talked about the overseas dissidents, right? And then we all care about them. Previously, did you understand the dissidents, human rights dissidents in foreign countries? Apart from you yourself, people around you, Navarro and those kind of politicians, do they know anyone that is human rights dissident? What do they think about them?
Oh, I think living in it's a good question. I think living in Washington D.C., we've gotten to know many of the dissidents, particularly from Tiananmen Square and from the years subsequent to that. The dissident community in Washington, particularly, is pretty well organized, pretty vocal, and has many intelligent people. I think, though, we're in a different phase, if I can say this, is that you've had for years kind of the democracy movement and the human rights movement, right? And that's been a very important movement, and those communities are pretty well organized and are very vocal about getting their message out. But something has happened, I think, in China over the last, I would say, 5 or 10 years, that I think now has raised it up almost beyond what has been the traditional dissident population and kind of the human rights population. It's clearly something going on in China in the last 10 years, and I think personified, and that's why I say it's personified by President Xi and Hua Xishan and Li He and these others that are this, I think, radical cadre of the CCP that now seems like they want to expand out and become a hegemonic power, right? And part of doing that is the absolute oppression first of the Chinese people, and particularly the oppression of the Chinese people through technology and kind of this new advances in technology. I think that is taking this up to the whole new level, and that's why I think the Rule of Law Fund is to try to expose this. If you step back and look at the dissident communities and how they have talked to politicians, how they've approached politicians, what they've done with politicians, they've been pretty organized, but it hasn't been really on a mass scale. I think one of the things that now has shocked people, right, is how brutal this totalitarian government has become against its own people, right? The brutality of the social credit scores, of the 500, where you see these prominent people missing, the videos that Miles Kwok and others show all the time of people being beaten like dogs. It's kind of that convergence of all that that's really taken it up, I would say, kind of supra dissident, even more than the dissidents have done over here for the last 10, 15, or 20 years. So that community has been good, but it's been small. It has made contact to everybody. But just the information that's coming out today, I think, is start to so overwhelm the people in the West. And remember, one of the key things we're trying to do in the Rule of Law Fund, and what I'm personally trying to do is say, hey, you in the West have responsibility, right? If you're the owners of these buildings, if you're the bankers, if you're the financials, you don't get clean hands anymore. You just can't make the money, right, and live a nice lifestyle and understand that you made that money taking it away from the Chinese people and giving it to their oppressors that are really running prison camps, that are putting people in prison, that are murdering people, that are having people disappear, that there has to be a connection, and you can no longer just go along with your life and kind of make this kind of money like you used to and be able to just kind of walk away from it. You are tied to the oppression of the Chinese people. And I think that's one of the key things the Rule of Law Fund is trying to do. And I think in that way, Mr. Luda will actually make what the dissidents have been saying for the last 15, 20, 25 years in places like Washington and London and other places, New York City, actually have more power.
Mr. Luda's question is very good. Mr. Bannon, he is actually the senior leaders in the U.S., right? So perhaps that he doesn't understand perhaps the dissidents in China. Now that, but then we did not talk about this before. Now, in fact, Mr. Bannon talked to me privately, though. I shared with him about the tragedy in China. We have 1.4 billion people, and then we have June 4th massacre, and we have a lot of dissident exile to the U.S. And then yet, versus Venezuela, there are 23 million population, right, in Venezuela? Yes, 是的。Now, so only 23 million of the population, they have, and then they have a lot of human rights dissidents, and you see, and they would use social media, and then they would be peacefully to do this kind of changing of the government. And but the thing is that they are very different from the dissident in China. Now, a lot of the dissidents that they come from China, they have they call for donations for the last 29 years, and also that they get a lot of donation. But the thing is that a lot of people. But then these dissidents, and they did not work, and then they only want people to make donation. And then they would actually go to the Congress to meet a councillor, a congressman, and take a photograph, and then they would call for donation. A lot of the dissidents were just asking for donation, but and then a lot of the people that in China wanted to make the donation, and then but they did not really do any real work. And in fact, that they are because you see a lot of the dissidents being exiled, and then they were initially the human rights warrior. But the thing is that while that they're being exiled, their strength, their power being taken off. They in fact that they were destroyed by the CCP. They did not. So the thing is that all these dissidents in the overseas, they were not real dissidents, and then they were not really doing any work. In fact, that Mr. Bannon understand there were dissidents, but the thing is that he probably did not know that any dissident doing real work, and then but Mr. Bannon, can you tell me any dissident organization? Can you know any one of them and name any one of them? And did you know what they do? And did you actually know that what they have achieved? And they only call for donation. They only want people donate, right? But the thing, and then yet every day they talk about they only calling names of the CCP, but they have not really achieved anything. But do you know that how many people are actually being persecuted? Now, I think that Mr. Bannon's Rule of Law Foundation, that you need to investigate not only the people that are persecuted by the Chinese government, you need to actually investigate those people that using the name as being the dissident and the human rights dissident, and then yet they're conning people's money. And then also, in fact, that they're destroying our actually human right activities. Like, for example, a lot of people, seriously, in fact, that they were having a lot of the movement, and they using the name of movement, and then trying to get money, trying to get donation. But these campaigns were not real, and then a lot of these campaigner, they become quite big, quite organized, and then in Flushing, and then they try to get people to do massage for them and all that. They are making donation, and then also that they are using dissident as a name and helping people. They so-called helping people to get the political asylum, but nothing have been achieved. So that is why the Rule of Law Foundation, we also must try to attack this fake dissident. And because they have destroyed the people, and then they destroyed the hope of these people, because they were talking about helping, but they were not really helping. So that is why that we established the Rule of Law Foundation. We need to do a lot of work in Flushing or the Chinatown. We need to actually discover the fake dissidents. Perhaps that you did not know there are so many fake dissidents. Now that maybe that, can you tell me what you think about this fake dissidents?
I think this is very important. I think it says in the New Testament, I think it's Jesus Christ says, by their work, it's the Gospel of Matthew, by their works ye shall know them. So I think you have to look at results, you have to look at action. I mean, one of the powers of Miles and others in Miles' situation is that they're very financially sophisticated and can actually look at complicated situations, help to take that apart and make connections. That, I think, is one of the most powerful things of the Rule of Law Fund, is that we're actually going about this in a very different way. This is now trying to connect, the elites in the United States that have been actually in partnership with CCP, and to expose that, and to use the media to expose that in the investigative apparatus, of which you saw Karin last summer actually become a big part of this in this H&A investigation that took place in France, took place in the United States, took place in China. I mean, it went worldwide, and to connect that. One of the things about the dissident groups, you always have to, and this happens in the United States all the time, when something happens, or you have some conservative cause, or some religious, particularly in the religious right, people are raising money, and people are out there trying to get money to put to use to it. Some of these groups do great work, and some of these groups do less great work. I think it's incumbent upon, one of the things here in the United States, we're about personal liberty and personal responsibility, and so it's your responsibility, if you give the money, to make sure you hold people accountable for what's been done. But yes, I would definitely say that, like in any endeavor, there's been groups that have come up and raised money and maybe haven't had that impact. And that all that gets to do is to show people in the government, maybe you don't have that much, you don't really have the stroke, you don't really have punching power, and then therefore go away and the CCP will win. The other more important thing it does, it'll make people kind of despondent, right? That your group will start to lose their momentum. Is a small aside to this. Just recently, some people approached me, and I'm helping them out on a private fund to actually build the wall in the southern border. And one of the reasons is that they're trying to help President Trump, who's being thwarted every day on actually building a wall. And citizens, just like dissidents in China, citizens came together and said, we want to do our own thing. And I helped them, because what it's doing is it's re-energizing people. I think with the Rule of Law Fund, in particular with everybody that's focused on what's going on in China and kind of the suppression, is that to look at the work we're doing, to look at the accomplishments we'll have. And one of the things we're trying to do here is get the spirit of everybody up, that there is something that can be done, people can be held accountable, and that action will be taken, right? And that action is actually, as we've said, ultimately to make sure that this radical cadre of the CCP cannot continue oppressing the people in China.
Mr. Bannon is very clear now that coming up that the overseas dissidents, they have already Li Weidong, for example, and He Ping, all these people, or Hu Ping, these people, they were using the name as a dissident and trying to get donation, but then we are going to discover them. And also some of the fake human rights lawyers, and we need to actually trying to discover them. You see, the thing is that Washington, D.C. is very big, and that so that they don't really understand exactly what the dissident is about. A lot of the dissident, they have this private hatred. No, you see, they are not really concerning about a nation's disaster, such as like Xinjiang people being locked up. So that is why that Mr. Bannon and us, that we again proved that we need to understand exactly what need to be done. We need to look at HNA. We need to look at Meng Jianzhu, Sun Lijing, and then they are like doing wicked things to young girls. And then we need to discover the Malaysian problem. And then they have stolen the Malaysians' money. And then we need to look at the U.S. that how many people and how many technology being stolen by the Chinese CCP, for example, the Boeing's technology, and also the autonomous aircraft. And this is also the technology stolen by this one person from China. So all of these things we disclosed online. And then we have the deed, we have the fact, we prove that to the U.S. So, but then yet the other dissidents, what did they do? They are talking about that they want donations from people. They want donation because they have cancer or they need to have a divorce and they need to get married. So all of these are for private things that they want to get money. Want to get donation. And the thing is that they did not tell anyone that they actually understand China has a spy system, and they did not have any proper document to support your work. So I think that we need to actually provide protection to the real dissidents, and yet that they need to provide evidence, so that we need to have action, we need to have campaign, but we cannot just have those fake dissidents. Now yesterday, at the end of our program, then he's about to go to another meeting.
Dissidents, you have to remember here that the CCP is a very, particularly the United Front, it's a very sophisticated operation. You know, some of these dissident groups, there's no doubt, are some of the fake dissident groups, because you have very good dissident groups. You have very good dissidents. I know some of these people personally. They've done hard work. They make very little money, and they're quite dedicated to the freedom of the Chinese people. I believe you're going to find on some of the fake dissidents, what you're going to find is an active involvement by CCP to kind of have false front operations here that kind of disperse the motive and the drive and all that of what we're trying to do. It wasn't too long ago, and Miles, you're too humble to bring it up, although Miles actually does 9 costume changes a day in the show. He's actually a very humble man. Remember early on, outside of Miles's apartment here, just a couple blocks away, every day there would be a huge, almost like a riot of China, and they were all paid by CCP. Remember, had the photographs of who the CCP guys were. So it's a very sophisticated operation. And one of the things it's trying to do is it's trying to dissipate the strength of really kind of the dissidents, the true dissidents' voices here in the United States, to get people to focus on exactly what the problems are. I just want to reiterate once again, the level of scandals, of financial scandals, from Huawei to HNA to Anban Insurance Company to all of this and this spy network that's in the United States, and quite frankly has Americans involved in it. Higginbotham's a perfect example. I think Higginbotham's the first of many that come out of this. The depth of this and the money, remember, Higginbotham is $70 million. Now, if you go back, and I did this the other night quickly, if you go back and look at what the Russians did basically with certain people in the Navy, in the uniformed services, and the CIA, they were paying nickels and dimes, right? $70 million boggles people's minds that they basically went through and paid one guy essentially. So I think as we peel the layers back on that and people see that they're going to be more and more shocked about the depth and sophistication of this. I think clearly part of this is false media narratives coming out about some of these dissident groups, and that's something we'll certainly take a look at. Remember that the objective here is to get to the truth. The truth is very powerful. The truth will set you free here. So that's where we talked about the special status in other countries or political asylum you can get here. The central basic part of all of this is the actions taken on these investigations, and that all comes from the whistleblowers, from people who have information, the ability to put facts forward that cannot be argued about, not just get you going in the civil rule of law situation here, but eventually we'll be able to potentially get government officials involved and actually lead to criminal endeavors.
Mr. Bannon explained very clearly, particularly great. Now, in China, a lot of overseas dissidents, they were bought by the CCP. That is why that the Miles calls broadcasting. The goal is to tell people what happened. Now that if you don't agree and don't support Miles Squad, then in that case that shows that you are really bought by the CCP. And then if you are insulting the Miles Squad, then obviously that you are definitely being bought by the CCP. In fact, there is this guy that he was calling me name all the time, and then he is definitely bought by the Wang Qishan and then Meng Jianzhu, because he even got the U.S. passport, and then we definitely need to investigate him, and we need to excavate all these fake dissidents that who got the U.S. passport, and yet they are the spy for the CCP, and then destroying a lot of the real dissidents. And in fact, some people actually protest outside my apartment and calling me a rapist and all that. Now, and then tell me to get out of the U.S. because Mao Squad destroying and damaging and harming my leader of the country, and that is how ridiculous. Now that if you're holding the American passport, your president's Donald Trump.
Note something that. You had a lot more of that. I mean, for people here in New York City, it got to be a big deal. I mean, every day Miles Kwok's apartment outside, we have a beautiful square dedicated to General Sherman, who was one of the great generals of the Civil War. It's actually painted in gold, right? So it's one of the big tourist attractions. Literally every day you couldn't get to General Sherman's monument because of the protest against Miles Kwok. You notice that ended around the time that this information on H&A started to come out. There's a direct correlation. There's a correlation between the power of facts, right, and what was going on. Clearly, the demonstrations against Miles were all funded and instigated by the CCP, right, to try to, get Miles thrown out of the country, to shut Miles up. But it shouldn't be lost on you. As soon as the details of H&A started to come out, all of a sudden you didn't see any protesters. They realized that was a failed strategy. So the point is that even someone like Miles Kwok that is in a different financial situation than most people watching this broadcast or most people that can follow it in mainland China, even with Miles, the laying out of facts that were irrefutable all of a sudden got even the CCP to back off a bit on the public demonstrations of what they were trying to do with some of these fake dissident groups. That's going to be very important going forward. Remember, it's all about the investigations. It's all about the facts. The more facts we have, the more fruitful investigations we have, the more actions we can take. That will build one upon the other, and I think really start to really help drive this real true freedom movement in China.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Bannon said a lot, and then I'm going to. We have another question. In fact, last night, that Mr. Bannon was very busy. He went away for meetings yesterday. Now, but the thing is that I need to talk to him. I must tell him that I read 3 important books. One is the book from Washington. I love political books. I wish that Mr. Bannon can become the modern Washington, that because he is a creator of the Common People's Campaign. because at the time that it was a monarch, and then Washington gave up his own position, and then built this People's Republic in the United States, and that is why that. Every time that I went to the Central Park, I would actually pay my respect to that statue in the Central Park of Washington, and in fact that he. At the time that the Washington actually give all the power back to the public, that is why that I respected him. And then the other one, and then the third one I respected was the great financier, and that his family had a lot of the connection with my family. And yesterday, that this person actually came to my apartment for dinner and with his wife, and this person actually very relevant to my year of growing up. I can't tell you his name, but I asked him that can we actually have a dinner together with Mr. Bannon, and then he said to me, oh yes, I must talk to Mr. Bannon. I love Mr. Bannon, and this friend of mine is 89 years old, and then he said to me that he wanted to talk to Mr. Bannon about the populist campaign, or common people's campaign, and America cannot continue this way. So that the last night, however, that Mr. Bannon cannot attend, and then he talked to, so that my friend talked to me about his experience. I'm going to tell you some of the information later on. And then last year, he said to me that something happened to him at home. His son-in-law, and then also that there was a council talked to him about that wanted to buy his financial license, his business license, and then he's on that the council is actually on behalf of the HNA, and the thing is that, and then the council actually said that money is not a problem. What if you're willing to buy, then if you're willing to sell, we can buy. And then he said, I don't understand HNA, but the council on behalf of HNA is lobbying him selling, and then also they're telling a lot of good things about HNA. So, but then this friend of mine, and then finally got to meet Chen Feng, and then also the Chen Feng, and then his family is talking about the talking to him, and then they wanted to buy his financial license and the business, and also buying the house of this guy, and then also the antique. And then also the antique, that a lot of the Chinese antique, I can tell you that they sold to 3 people. One is myself, one is a French family, and then also the other family who bought a lot of the. And then the other is the other buyer of a Chinese antique is my friend, and then in fact that he is the founder of Thomas Edison's founder, and then in fact that the thing is that he bought a lot of Chinese antique, and then antique did not. And then Shen Feng wanted to buy his antique as well, but then my friend rejected it, and then in fact that my friend. And then Chen Feng did not just want to buy antique and the house. In fact, that he said that I want to buy all of your books. And then he said that. And then he got my friend out onto the car, and then he said that I can give you all this money. And then he showed the money in the boot of the car. And then to my friend, the thing is that this is actually a great thing, because that my friend is very wealthy. But the thing is that my friend was shocked that Chen Feng would show him all this money at the boot of the car, and then so several tens of millions and billions of dollars, and then so the thing is that I just wanted to tell Mr. Bannon that my friend wanted to meet him. And my friend actually wanted to talk to me about H&A, and wanted to talk to him about the H&A. And do you know? And then also that I can tell him, my friend, that the council who was actually helping H&A, and then he killed himself. But then the council, before he died, that he actually helped H&A to fabricate a lot of documents. And the thing is that, and I can tell my friend, I told my friend that I knew about this incident, that the counsel who helped H&A had killed himself in a car park. The thing is that, some messages. Okay. Okay, so
Wow.
We've hooked up a link of that, so all of
Congratulations.
all of America is now watching this. Movement.
我们
but I know that Mr. Trump is watching me. I know that. And then perhaps I can't tell you yet, a lot of a secret here.
everything just beginning 啊，everything。所以这种的开场白演讲，一切都是个。
So everything is just a beginning. A lot of secrets. I must tell you a lot of secret later on. Now the thing is that, in fact, that Mr. Bannon, you need to know about this. You see, this counsel that who killed himself, right? And then they were saying that this counsel who were helping H&A killed himself by taking selfie again. Do you know how ridiculous it is? So, but the thing is that he's killed by, or forced to kill himself by the H&A. So you can imagine how abominable, diabolical that the H&A is. Now that they wanted to actually buy my friend's financial business, and definitely H&A is representing Wang Qishan, and then in fact that my friend had already discovered some problem with that transaction. And then they actually so horrible. Then they were saying that, oh, I buy your business, I buy your house, I buy your antique, I buy your everything. And so last night I was having dinner with my friend, and my friend told me a lot of a story. He was 89 years old. And then my friend asked me, so Miles, you and Bannon definitely going to take down the CCP? And I must talk to Mr. Bannon. And maybe the 2019 is too soon. And then I said that you are 89 years old. You can't wait for another year, 10 years, and another 10 years. You're probably not going to be here to see my achievement. So that is why that I said that if you want to make donation, that you are going to make that donation to Mr. Bannon, the Rule of Law Foundation. So actually, that tomorrow I'm supposed to go to his friend. And then I go to my friend's home. That a lot of antique there. A lot of antiques. And then he said that I definitely consider to make donation to the Rule of Law Foundation, but I must work together with you, really, and to think about how to actually take down the CCP. It's inconceivable, right? Now that my friend has another friend called Rothschild.
This is the power, I think, of what you accomplished so far and what potentially the Rule of Law Fund could do. On the H&A situation, the largest financial company in the world, when the chairman CEO dies, it's a short story in the world's media, right? In French papers and American papers, it's like that long, right? That he died suddenly in France taking a selfie. And it was our colleague here, Ms. Karin, in the investigative team. When you guys went right away, you understood in talking to the French people by going out into the field and talking to the little guy, not to the high authorities, but to the little guy that said there's no chance, there was a total lie. Just exposing that lie in and of itself blew this entire thing up, right? Because you see, once you send somebody out there and you saw it and did those great videos, that you saw right away how ridiculous this was, right? And also, how could mainstream media, how could the powerful media in France, in the United States, and in London all believe what was obviously a lie, that the investigators went there and all the people in the little village knew was a lie?
And how people didn't want to talk to us. That's
Exactly,
another
have been
point.
suppressed. That's the power, I think, when you talk about this with your friend, is that, hey, we've got the ability to actually expose the lies.
是的，办的
Yes, it's very correct. Rothschild 呢，在in fact Rothschild invested a lot in China. He's my good friend, and then QQ, Tencent, and Alibaba, and BYB.
David Rothschild?
Yes, grandson.
The grandson. The
Grandson
grandson.
also Jacob.
Jacob.
And Jacob as well. And Jacob.
Brilliant investment.
Yeah.
Yes. They know you. They all know you, and they all know that you're anti-CCP. So they all know you. And yesterday, when we're talking about H&A, and then also the investigation of Wang Jian, it was great. And then also that your 11/20 conference, now that everyone in the West understand. In fact, that they are saying that they worry about their friend and their family, their investment in China. So the thing is that that's great that we actually expose the CCP, and and then so that now that we expose the the thing, the kind of the thing that happened to Wang Jian, and we still have a lot of evidence that we are not showing yet. The thing is that Karin went to France for the investigation. We talked to the police, but the thing is that police told us that they don't want to talk to us. They talked to us, but then the thing is that they told us not to expose that, expose them. So we respect the police. So that is why that we did not show them. But the thing is that now Karin, she went to France for the investigation. She knew very clearly that Wang Jian was not actually died by selfie, but then he killed himself. What do you think about that? Can you tell us your impression?
So,
There's a latency. Scroll up. Sorry.
Where from? Hi.
Coming now
What
for the Chinese. I'm waiting for it to.
没问题。
Okay, no question. Karin, you can tell us. What do you think about that? What you found? I think it's incredible for myself. I was not a policeman, right? You all know that I'm not a police, but it's clearly last year we went to France. We went several times. From day one, at the beginning, I knew exactly what happened there. In fact, that you don't even need to be an expert, even though that we are professionals, except me. We don't even need to have a professional. Then you realize what happened really. The war was just a small war and a short war. A person, this wealthy person, and this a powerful man, and then he's a chairman of a Chinese organization, and yet died by selfie. It's inconceivable. But what is so difficult to understand is that there are so many people around, and yet nobody talk. Nobody dared to talk or raise a voice, and that is so incredible to us. We talked to the police, and then we talked to so many people. A lot of people told us that we know somebody is controlling us, and that we feel like this is. I think that is not what happened. We know what happened, but we dare not to say it. So it is a small village. And then the thing is that, and then so this guy is so rich and so wealthy, and then why would he go to such a small village to take a photograph and die? So it's obviously he cannot be selfie. He has his own team. His team would take photograph for him, and also it's such a small village, and everyone around was just elderly, and yet something like that happened. And he was claimed to jump on the wall, take selfie, die by selfie. You can think yourself, right? Yes. What Karin said is exactly it. Cannot be die by selfie. And then the Wang Qishan and those they were saying that die by selfie. But then of course that even now that everybody is recognize the fact that it's not die by selfie. And then they can't be sprinting 3 times and jumping on a short wall and then die by selfie. How can that be possible? And then nobody can really sprint and then jump up to the short wall, right? And he is only one person there. There's supposed to be 6 people, and then or like 10 people supposed to be surrounding him. In fact, all this conflicting information show that what we disclosed was real, and he cannot be died by selfie. He cannot be committed suicide. And Wang Jian, we have known a lot of information about Wang Jian. We have a lot of shocking information we are going to will broadcast, but not yet. But in fact, that we may have a new conference, press conference concerning Wang Qishan, Chen Feng, and Liu Chengjian. And also the concerning Yang Guang, the chairman, and then also that and concerning the two French Vial
改碳，你说他吗？
啊，
改碳。
刷菲里奥、苏菲里，这都会。
we concerning Vial and Sylvie as well, and also Huabing, and we can tell you Wang Jian's business is definitely going to be disclosed. The truth will be discovered. And so we need to prove that the ridiculous way that the CCP is doing things, and then how they can actually openly and kill people. And then the Wang Jian incident is definitely going to help me to prove that. Now, Sarah, your question. Can I make some addition? 可以啊。H&A is the greatest business in China. Imagine CEO of Apple died. A lot of media is going to report on him, right? For example, Tim Cook or someone that they die. Okay, Sarah's asking question now. I'm sorry that the voice is overlapping. Okay, and Sarah asking question to Mr. Bannon. We know that the Wang Qishan is a bad guy, big bad wolf. Now, but I want to mention Sun Lijun, Meng Jianzhu as well, because they want to repatriate Mao's Guo. They exercise BGY action in the U.S., particularly now that they are trying to persecute the people that who help with Mao's Guo in the expose. So, Mr. Bannon, Rule of Law Foundation, can you take any specific action that can pursuing the crime that committed by Meng Jianzhu and Sun Lijun?
The crime committed by
Sun Lijun, Meng Jianzhu. Right. Yeah.
I think specifically what we have to do, Miles is already into the counter stage in the suit about requiring discovery. Like I said, this is all about action. I think the action is going to come through the court system of getting this information of the financial institutions and the people who are involved. The H&A investigation is at the very beginning. That's going to have many, many layers to it and expose a lot. And so yes, it's incumbent upon us, Miles' investigative apparatus, the Rule of Law Fund, to continue on with that, and then eventually, I think that the authorities will get involved. But we have to start to find out what exactly went on, and part of that's the countersuit with Miles. All of these things are kind of meticulous. You have to get the details. You have to have the facts. So they're just looking for you to get one fact wrong to kind of throw the whole thing out. So I believe that people will be brought to justice and will be heard. I don't for a second believe the official story, which is that he died taking a selfie. I just don't. I've seen the facts of what Karin and the investigative team have brought back. I've talked to the people in France that came back here. I think there's zero chance that he just fell by taking a selfie. That in and of itself is a lie, right? And that's the central lie. I think also we have to find out the involvement of the Interpol, the Chinese official at Interpol that then went missing. So I think there's many, many levels of this that have to be investigated, Sarah, but I do believe that as we go forward, you're going to start to see eventually official action getting to be taken, because I think it's just too big. It's too big a scandal.
I think Mr. Bannon is talking about Meng Jianzhu and Sun Lijun, and also their persecution to the friends who help us, right? Now, in fact, Sarah and Luda need to collect more relevant information. Rule of Law Foundation in the U.S. could make a lot of discoveries and can deploy a lot of the investigations, and then perhaps maybe we could actually make use of RICO Act to prosecute those people. Perhaps that the warrior friends and also Luda and Sarah, perhaps that you can make also more investigation and also broadcast more talking to the people, and then telling people about the truth, and then also giving us the information, and then we can use those. Now, in fact, that after my discourse, we're going to have 5 minutes of a break. 还有一点我要说。
Back to the thing about persecution of people coming forward, I think one of the realities we have to understand, and I think this is what it talks about the bravery of people in mainland China that are coming with this information, plus the people who have been oppressed, but Mr. Luda, Sarah, other voices out there that are part of this new media apparatus, clearly the persecution is going to continue on of you. The only way we're going to stop the persecution is to make these stories so big, like the Khashoggi story. You have to make these stories so big that the media has to deal with it. Once the media starts dealing with it, the American people get involved, and they will take our side. There's no doubt about that. But I think that one thing we have to be very cognizant of, whether it's Miles Kwok or whether it's Sarah Chu or Mr. Luda or all the others, voices out there that are in this kind of new media promoting this, there's an incredible amount of persecution of you, and that will just continue on. I mean, they're playing for keeps here. The CCP understands that their biggest enemy is the truth. The more you talk about facts, the more you talk about truth, they just can't continue to deny it. And so what they have to do is to destroy the truth tellers, whether that's extraditing Miles Kwok back to mainland China, or whether it's suppressing the voices of you and Mr. Luda. So you will this persecution, I think we have to be realistic. It's just not gonna stop until you're victorious.
Mr. Bannon, you think it's already very, you have already answered, but then Ms. Sarah is very important that we need to disseminate what has been said. We need to openly talk about this, and then the rule of law submission is very important because we need to help people, rescue people, protect people, and anti-CCP, it is definitely important. And for example, like we need to work hard, and then we need to be the second Venezuela, and we need to, while that there is riot, while there is confusion, we need to do a lot of preparatory work to support the people. So, for example, supporting the military, the police, and the family, because we understand that in China, that we know that the military, the police, a lot of people are good people. They were not persecuting, but the thing is that they need to trust us. We need to tell them that we will protect them, protect the family, so that they are willing to join us, So we are capable of doing that. We need to let them morally and trusting us, and then legally trusting us. And then the rule of law foundation is under the protection of the legal system in the US, so that all of our documents are legally binding, and because they are real and they are factual. So that is why that we are morally obeying the rule of law in the US, and so that we need to, so that we are not going to, so I feel like that we are encouraging the military people trusting us, working with us. You see, Venezuela, there is no army helping them, right? But the thing is that in the China, if the army is standing with us, then there is no way the CCP the cadre can continue. So the thing is that in China, that is either the people were being bought or being suppressed. We need to liberate the people who are being suppressed and being bought. If we can actually, we are not against the Chinese people. We are not even against the 90 million of the CCP. We only need to take down those several cadre. And so release those power and return those power to the people. Okay, that is our mission. So now we're going to have 5 minutes break. And Luda's question and Sarah's question, very good. But then our video and the audio system today is not so good. And then so that we have great people, and yet our audio system need to be improved. And I apologize to Luda and Sarah. So now that we have 5 minutes break, okay? Thank you.
好。
jiri. 让可亲自分担当的走散那步。
就是现场播出的情况，让我看看做什么。Chinese come back。
你怎么这样？
你有个问题，小哥，你问他能给人家基金做啥呀？他是这样人，这样人太多了，咱得给基金能做啥？这个问题你问的很不礼貌啊！这个问题也没道理，我没法给你问这个问题啊，因为他能做啥啊？我们得马上买这个同声传译这个机器。 OK，入伏，开始。OK，
Okay.
action action，
Mr. Bannon, can you hear me?
real action 啊。
Okay.
OK， 亲爱的战友们，我
My
们回来了啊，
dear
回来了
comrade
咱
in
换上
arms,
中国装了。刚才
again,
班农先
we
生羡慕
returned.
我的中国衣服了。
Mr. Bannon
咱没
said
有
that
他的
my
长发，没
Chinese
有他的
costume
笑
looked
容，
very
咱
good.
有衣
But the
裳
thing
的
is
补啊。
that because I am not as handsome as him, so I have
这
to
个
actually
我
gain
们现在
upper
回来
hand by
刚才呢
wearing different
路德
clothes.
先
Now, and Mr. Luda and Miss Sarah.
I'm trying to get Miles away since I don't wear a tie, right? I wear 3 shirts and no tie. I've been trying to convince Miles to go to the Chinese version of my style. And I just want to say, Miles, I'm so happy that you've now gotten the Chinese version of the Bannon style, a couple of shirts and more traditional garb, no tie.
No tie.
No Western, that's what the elites use to confine us, right? So we've thrown off the tie.
所以
Mr. Bannon, he is such a pure and childlike, and we can feel that in our life. And in fact, I have worked with a lot of Western people, and yet the Mr. Bannon is the elite amongst the elite. It is not just that he boasted it himself. It's because I can see that how observant that he is, and he has such a great vision. But of course, there are a lot of questions need to be resolved. Now, Mr. Bannon has a lot of view about that. Now, but anyway, we are not going to broadcast Luda and Sarah. Now, I am going to ask Miss Karin, our beautiful Karin, answer some question. A lot of people asking her question. Now, Karin, you know, a lot of messages asking you questions. Last time in the program, I was saying that your view on love and family and on the world, and a lot of people want to hear more from you, particularly that we were chatting, and you got married and you were happy, and then your husband, and then you love your husband, you said. And so how can you prove that you love your husband very much? I said, well, because I have many love affairs before. I said, how many times? Yes. And then I said, so with what kind of people you have fell in love? She said that, oh yes, I have many love affairs, and then so my husband now is the best. So you know the best. And then I said, how many of you that you have dated? She said 100. Now, of course, I was just saying that I was heart beating. My heart beat so hard at the time that I heard that she had the best, you know. And but then because a lot of Chinese people, they remained to be virgin until that they got married, you know, because they want to be pure. But then after they got married, although they have a lot of affairs, but then the thing is that Karin, she said that she actually tried to have a lot of a love affair, have a lot of experience, and then she found the best, and she engaged into this wonderful marriage life. So Karin, tell me, so that you have so many affair, and then find the perfect husband. Can you give us some advice?
目前都在
Well, I am watching your program, and I find that embarrassing. This question is so embarrassing. Now that no, it's like this. Now, 他是一个的天
I'm more Catholic.
Karin is very religious. You should know she's very religious.
But I'm more Catholic than my family.
我也不是那么的真的那么虔诚呢。我的家庭呢是天主教。In fact, I have talked to my friends a lot, basically in China, a lot of people ask me advice in China. Uh, a, a lot of parents in China, they demand a lot to to the children when they were young. 2-year-old kid, they must learn all the Chinese characters and write. They can write and read Chinese character when they were 2 years old. It's so impossible. You see, I think that each age would have their development stage, right? And they have different steps of growth. So I think the children should be allowed to be children. And you shouldn't give them that kind of a demand, And so, but then yet, parents in China, and then a lot of my friends told me that they had to learn. They had to start to learn when they were young. They were child. They were not children. And they were 5-year-old go to primary school, and then since primary school that they have to spend 10 hours at school, and then at home they have to go do homework, and then so high school is even worse. The whole life is about test. Now they cannot have girlfriends and boyfriends, so all of their time was engaged in studying, and everyone said that in China. After university, and then you have to go to good universities. You if you can't go to secondary university, you have to go to the best university, and then also you need to study, and then you need to graduate. And then you need to graduate the first time, and and then after that, you go to postgraduate, and then PhD, and then you need to get married immediately. So in that case, how can you get married? Where would you have time to get to know girlfriends or boyfriends or engage into any love affairs? And then after you get married, that you must produce children immediately. My friends are following this path like that. Now, my girlfriends, I have a girlfriend, and she told me that, do you know, every weekend, she said that she met 200 men in 1 year. Because she wanted to get married, and then after she got married, and then I said that, so she introduced her boyfriend to me, actually not husband, okay, and then she said to me that her boyfriend is very ugly. But then I said, how can you tell him that he's ugly, and then yet you want him as boyfriend? She said, that's my family introducing him to me, and all my friends are like that. And then she's so unhappy when she got married, because that is not a boyfriend that she wanted herself, introduced to her by her family. So that is why I said to you that I have free affairs. I get to know my boyfriend, myself, and my husband. I chose for my husband, and no one tell me what to do. And so we have such a better life. So of course, I think that my advice is that you need to play, you need to work, you need to have family, yes, but you do it for yourself. You decide for yourself. You decide when to have children, when to get married, whether you want to study, what things that you need to study, you see. So you need to create your own life. But I think that Chinese people had a lot of pressure. You need to enjoy life. Otherwise, I just think that it's worth it to live. It is really what happened in China. It is actually very relevant to the ruling of the CCP. Now, CCP, and they educate people. They have destroyed humanity. Even when children were little, they were teaching children to strengthen their hatred, and then to strengthen their power. And then the children were taught to speak differently in front of people and behind people. And then children were taught not to be truthful, because so that is why that when you grow up, for climbing up the social ladder, for climbing up the political ladder, you can sleep with anyone and you can lie about anything. And so that is why that, nowadays there were political people that who had the like mistresses, over 100 of them. And then even the female politician, they will sleep with whoever, so that is why that there is no moral anymore. Now, and then Karin is talking to us about her view, but I am talking about the political system. This political system destroy humanity, then destroy the chance to be falling in love, and then, of course, that the Karin must have tried different men, and then she found the best to be her husband. Now, but the thing is that in China, it's not like that. In China, you study because you want to be in the government, and when you're in government, you have the supreme power so that you can rape people, exploit people, so that you are suppressing humanity and morale. So that is why that in China, nobody is happy. No one can grow up happily. You cannot have a healthy family. And if you don't have a healthy life, how can you have a healthy future? Now, that is why that is so wicked of the CCP. And then they destroy faith in people as well. Now, I'm telling you that when I'm talking about that she has 100 affairs, that is wrong, of course. It's just me who's saying that. She's very pure, and then she's a Catholic, and then she is very conservative, and she is keeping her own faith and keeping her own innocence. And if people does not have faith, and there is no health, and there is no love, and so they can have all kind of a bad behavior. So that is why that Karin is a person that I respect her, and she's very pure and she's devout. Now, Mr. Bannon, your turn. What about your personal life? And you have a very colorful personal life. You have many wives, right? And so now that, in fact, I want to talk to you about that, but then, his ex-wife is very, I know that there are girls very beautiful, but then what about you as a Catholic? What is your view on love and the beautiful women? What is your view on beautiful women, and then your love life, and then what do you think about the CCP's thing in here?
Well, I work, I pride myself on, because of the things I work on, I work, as Miles knows, 7 days a week, 20 or 18 hours a day, so I don't have any time for any social life, which is fine. I'm very focused on the work ahead, and that's where I get my enjoyment. I think one of the key things you just brought up about the family and how important the family is in China, in the United States. Remember, the CCP, and particularly these radical cadres, number one thing they want to do is break the family unit apart, right? So that you're dependent upon them. You're dependent upon them for advancement. You're dependent upon them for your livelihood. You're dependent upon them for basically everything. And I think that goes against the grain of so much of Chinese history, culture, and society, because the family's always been the central unit of the family. Now, you do get into this tension in the modern world of, the traditional marriages being arranged by the families, or the elders in the family pick who they think should be the more perfect person for you, and of course young people are rebelling to that. I think it's one of the things about, particularly in the United States, when I see Chinese people come here to the United States and I see them thrive and I see them flourish, right? It's this American Revolution, which was about individual responsibility, right? Individual liberty, right? The ability to be in a civil society, but have a certain amount of freedoms, and you have to put your own restraints on yourself. Everything's not just about the collective part of society, but you have to put your own restraints upon yourself. You've seen so many Chinese come over here to the West and be enormously successful. So I think that's something that'll be worked out, over the next decades or hundreds of years. But the CCP, and I think this, Miles, is one of the reasons you and I talked a lot about, there's a complete lockdown on any discussion of the Cultural Revolution. Because in the Cultural Revolution, that's really where the CCP and certain radical cadres really try to go to the core of the Chinese family and try to destroy the Chinese family. So it's to me, it's fascinating to see what I call old 100 names. They continue to kind of go through life, and as many times as they try to get destroyed, they kind of push on, and it's I think the centerpiece of Chinese society. But no, for my personal life, it's. I'd rather broadcast here than as Miles knows, I don't drink. The only problem I don't smoke. The only thing is that I was supposed to lose weight. Of course, Miles's meals he serves here at the broadcast, so make sure that I'm gonna lose the bet. So no, but that's the thing of my personal life.
Mr. Bannon, very good. And he's exactly like that. What you see in him is what you get in him. Very, very genuine. But the thing is that he won't evade. And so you can see that when he is standing in front of people speaking, he is a philosopher, a strategist, and he's a campaigner. He's a genius, a great man. But then in real life, he is very down to earth, and it is very honest. But then he's so real, so genuine. And then sometimes that talking love is an art. You cannot be so real, so truthful, And then if you're so truthful, sometimes you may not be able to speak in some sweet talk to people. So now a lot of people leaving me message, including Taiwan friends from Taiwan. They care about Mr. Bannon's health. I told Mr. Bannon that you need to reduce 35 pounds. You reduce weight, lose some weight. Then that he said he reduced 15 pounds, and he was already very nervous because he only got 15 pounds lost. And then so anyway, he worried about his losing his weight. But the thing is that I want him to be healthy, so I want him to lose some weight. Now, but Taiwan people care about Mr. Bannon also. Now, a lot of people, millions of people from Taiwan, friends from Taiwan, care about you because they know that you are going to be helpful to Taiwan. You're going to tell people in the West about Taiwan. Now, because Mr. Bannon, you have been a soldier. You've been stationed in South Sea and Taiwan Strait. And so that also that you understand the intelligence work and you understand Taiwan. So that is why that we all want you to be healthy. And because you are the future of Taiwan. Now, and then also that we all wish Mr. Bannon to care about Taiwan connection with mainland China, because a lot of the CCP definitely going to attack Taiwan. I hear a lot of people from mainland China told me that the CCP is supportive of attacking Taiwan. In fact, Wang Qishan encouraged Xi Jinping is going to attack Taiwan, perhaps maybe in 10 years' time. So Wang Qishan, Meng Jianzhu, their thought and their view about the Taiwan situation. In fact, to me, I understand a lot of leaders in the military because they want to distract people's mind and they want to distract people as a focal point. That is why that they want to attack Taiwan so that people would not be looking so much about the One Belt, One Road and the financial situation. So let me ask Mr. Bannon about another question. CCP, if in the recent years, now, because China cannot resolve their financial crisis with the U.S., and then they cannot experience any structural reform in China. So they are going to attack Taiwan to distract people's mind. So what can Taiwan people do? What should Taiwan people do? And what U.S. will do? Will U.S. protect Taiwan? Can Mr. Bannon give us an answer?
Yes, I think this goes back to President Trump's State of the Union the other night, where he said that the deals that they're working on right now with the Chinese, and as you know, there's going to be this very big meeting in Vietnam at the end of February, beginning of March. Where first there'll be a meeting with the South Koreans, and then there'll be a meeting with President Trump will go to Beijing, I think, and meet with President Xi. That the United States is going to demand structural reforms. There's going to be some sort of structural reforms that are going to be part of this, and that's a key part of this. I think in a lot of respects this may actually just continue on, some of the financial pressure on China. I have said for a long time, and a lot of people have said for a long time that the regime has more and more financial problems, as the regime has more and more social control problems, as the regime has, as this One Belt, One Road, and a lot of the money they've put overseas doesn't start coming back and they start having more and more financial pressure, I think you're going to see a situation, we call it wag the dog. It's where that elites, when they're in trouble, try to strike out and have some sort of national security or foreign policy crisis. That's where Taiwan comes into play. The one thing, Miles, I would slightly disagree with some of the assessment you've seen from China. I think this happens a lot quicker than 10 years. I think that the Taiwan situation is something that could happen in the next 3 to 5 years. I said actually on my radio show back in 2000, in I think it was 14 or 15, that I thought the United States might be in some sort of conflict with the CCP in the South China Sea within 5 years. I think Taiwan's now actually taken that and actually a bigger problem. And one of the reasons is I think that the CCP looks at that as a way to galvanize the Chinese people and to start beating the war toxins or the war drums to get people very set that this is against America, this is against the West, and that's where we got to take back Taiwan. I think that the Taiwanese people, I think the most important thing is to continue and build enthusiasm for an alliance or for connection with the West, with both Japan, South Korea, the United States, etc. What the world is going to look at is your not just ability, your desire to keep your freedom. I think that'll be the central thing. I think that's why there's so many subterranean situations in Hong Kong and Taiwan, infiltration situations where CCP is trying to show that a significant part of the population doesn't want to fight for their freedom. I think that Taiwan will be a beacon of freedom. It has been a beacon of freedom, but the people of the world are going to have to know that. So I think it's a very tough situation for the Taiwan people. Like I said, I spent a lot of time in Taiwan in the 1970s and early 80s and have a great appreciation for Taiwan. And I think that, look, they're in a very tough situation. But as you know, Miles, that's a chess piece that the CCP is going to try to use. And I think the Taiwan people have to show the world, right, that we want our freedom, that we're prepared to do anything to defend our freedom. I think if the Taiwan people show that I think the world will unite around them. And of course, the CCP, as soon as they hear that, their heads blow up. So it's, as Miles can tell you, it's a very sore point. But I think once again, the Taiwanese people telling the world that we want our freedom, we want to be, we want to have self-determination, will be one of the key things here.
Mr. Bannon was very true, very real. The Taiwan friends from Taiwan, you must understand what he said. In fact, that one of our friends, he is from the Defense Ministry of Defense, and he also told me that he is a very critical person, and he also told me many information. He feels that CCP definitely want to attack Taiwan, and if Taiwan was under attack by the surroundment of CCP, then Taiwan people must stand up and defend themselves. Then U.S. will be behind them. And this general and myself, we will lobby in the U.S. to help Taiwan if Taiwan is under threat by the CCP. And because CCP may try to distract their own financial pressure, and so that they would try to attack Taiwan. And then if Taiwan under attack, if Taiwan is resisting, U.S. will stand behind Taiwan to help them. Taiwan, because as I said, first today we had already talked about Taiwan, and Mr. Bannon asked, why did we not protect Taiwan? You see, the thing is that there's several thousands of years of a culture, in fact, that it was disrupted and destroyed by the Cultural Revolution that is actually promulgated by the CCP. And it had destroyed our culture. It is important. Now, that the thing is that Mr. Bannon and Ms. Karin, you love China because you love the Chinese culture, and yet such culture was destroyed by the Cultural Revolution, the hooligans who were the members of the CCP, and they destroyed our culture. And it has so become a chasm. It had become a fault line, and it was not to be continued to be known by the people today in China. So, but then yet Taiwan preserved our culture. So Taiwan had contributed a great deal for China because it has preserved our precious culture and to preserve our human treasure. if CCP attack Taiwan, several tens of millions of people are going to be under attack. And then I think that Taiwan can form the alliance with Japan and then even North Korea and Korea. And then so that we would be standing together to resist the CCP's attack. And also if the CCP destroy and successfully attack and take over Taiwan, then Hong Kong would become the next target. And that is really a great danger. So we definitely must resist the attack of CCP's attack in Taiwan. We talked, Mr. Bannon and I talked that we must really lobby for the support of Taiwan. So Mr. Bannon's message is very clear now. Now, other friends are going to ask many questions to Karin. We have friends asking Karin and very interested in Karin. Now, Karin, you stayed in China for many times, and have you met with a China official? And what is your impression of the Chinese officials? And also, particularly in Nankai University, they have they nurture a lot of Chinese officials. What is your impression of them? Yes, I have met with many of them. In fact, I have many friends, parents, they were Chinese officials. They have impact. They have positive impact on me. What I'm saying is that they're very nice to me. And it's because if you don't look at them from the political light, they are nice people. Like I said, Chinese people are very nice people.
I met in China. There was no one I found unpleasant, I found who was bad towards me, because Chinese people in their core are good. They have a very strong sense of family. They have a very strong sense of connection, of friendship even. So whatever I would do, they would help. So it doesn't really matter once you're there who they are and what kind of job they're doing, because towards you, they're good. Now, if you put them back to that environment, it's like a zoo. It's like if you have animals running free in a jungle, they just do what they're supposed to do. Now, if you put them in a zoo, in a circus, that's where they start changing. And that's what I found. They were completely different people. If you consider like people working in politics, people even police officers, they were completely different people in a work environment where they had to demonstrate something to others, and they could not act freely. They could not act according to their own will and what they were as individuals.
You're so kind, and so you have not seen Wang Qishan, Meng Jianzhou, and then they were not kind people.
People I met were not high officials, and they were ordinary people who, even working for the government, they really didn't have any connection.
So now we have a lot of friends asking a question. First, ask Mr. Bannon. Mr. Bannon, and this is Zhang Muihong. He's from Wuhan. He's from Wuhan province. His Wuhan village, and he was a person had been persecuted, and so he also very young. And he came from a village, and he mentioned that he wants China to have rule of law and to have a democracy. Now that he is also staying in NYC, and he's an Uber driver, he's waiting to be approved of political asylum. Now, he asked many questions. I'm going to ask you one. Mr. Bannon, this year, CCP had done a lot of persecution to those dissidents abroad. And so they cannot even go abroad with a visa, and they cannot go to visit the embassies. So can they actually go through some of the peripheral countries, such as like Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Korean embassy? Can they go to seek help from those embassy, so the Rule of Law Foundation can extend their help to those embassy, and then so that help them to get out of China and get to the U.S.
That's one of the things we're going to try to attempt to work on this year. It's going to be obviously very, 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 very difficult. The special status is obviously very controversial. I understand that it's a huge problem right now. It's one of the reasons, one of the ways, as Miles and I have talked, the CCP keeps such control over things, is that they're able to actually control this, and so and to continue to oppress people. It's obviously something we have to work through. It's one of our action items for 2019. Like I said, I think that we'll get better traction the more investigations we do, the more we bring this up to people's, and it really get into people's conscience that this is a massive problem. Because right now they're not getting the full story. They don't really understand how desperate the situation is. But I agree with you. I think that in both Western Europe, in South America, Canada, in addition to the United States and Australia, that this situation has to be looked at immediately, because this is something that's these are people that really are being, I think the word you use there, persecuted, is absolutely correct. It's one of the things that you should also know that I've been bringing up with Catholic officials about this whole deal that the Pope is prepared to sign with the CCP, because to your comment, you used the word persecuted. There's, I believe, people in China are not just the dissidents abroad, but people in China are being persecuted every day. Clearly, they're trying to persecute the dissidents that are overseas, and so it is to try to bring to the world's attention that this persecution is going on, and it's going on in mainland China to the degree it's going on with dissidents that have left China. Then they have to get somehow to try to get them asylum, and try to get them some sort of protection. But it's particularly a very, very, very difficult situation.
Mr. Bannon also answered a lot. Now we have friends asking other questions to Karin. Many people want to ask Karin that. So, according to what Mao said, when you were recruited, you were also recruited by Google and Microsoft, and yet that you rejected the high income job and work for Mao Squad. Why? Why would you want to work for Miles? What exactly is your purpose and your goal?
And why you choose a job? You have many reasons to choose a job. You can do it for money, you can do it because it's close to home, you can do it because it's convenient, comfortable, or you can do it because you have a certain series of ideals that you believe in, and you want to work in that direction. Now, we were talking about Google, and that was just an example. To me, what Google or Apple or companies like this did, they have already changed the world. So they started years ago, and they completely revolutionized the way we see things, the way we do things, and our daily lives. Now, the reason why I started following Mr. Guo when I was in China, actually. I was using the VPN, and the reason why I was so stubborn about it is because I couldn't Google anything, I couldn't read my emails, and I started following him back in 2017 over there. When he talks, and the first reason why I said I want to join them is because they represent the new Chinese. Those Chinese who really just don't want to change things, but are actually doing something to change them. Because if you say, I want to change things, we can all say that. It's pretty easy. Talking is pretty easy. But you have someone here who put their life at risk and who is risking a lot every single day just to help their people to have a better life and just to help the world to get rid of something that is internally evil and poisoned. So we work together every day, most obviously. It's not always easy, so we got into a lot of fights.
You tell the truth.
Truth to power. Search for facts.
It's challenging. But you know every single day that you are doing something not for your paycheck, but you are doing something to help people in some way, even in your little, because in the company, we can't be compared, right? He's the boss. I'm just trying to do something, even a very little and a very small things, just to help this new Chinese ideals to come up and to fight what we, and more people believe is wrong.
Miss Karin, and she spent a lot of time with Miles. Maybe she's regretting, but anyway, and Mr. Bannon heard that, and he said that it's difficult to spend time with Miles Gore, right? It's difficult to spend time with Miles. It's difficult, I understand. But the thing is that to spend time with me is not easy. And I really appreciate my wife. My wife has spent 34 years with me. And I talked to my wife. I told my wife that, you are great, that you've been with me for 34 years. She said 10 years ago, it's whatever you want you want to go, I will go with you. And then do you know that to spend 20 years with you is difficult, but now that spend with me is good. Now the thing is that the 34 years, the thing is that you're not a hero. You have 100 men. I tell you, to spend 34 years with someone is a hero. And I myself, I have some merit. If you understand my merit, I am actually quite extraordinary. But the thing is that, but of course, that if you don't understand that, you may find that it's quite difficult. Now that you think that I'm flawed, I am really flawed. But at the same time, I am a honest person and I'm a kind person that is real, though. I'm flawed, but I'm kind and I am real. So I am really quite not a bad person. Okay. So we have friends from Beijing. Ladies from Beijing, her English is really good. And then she wanted to ask 2 questions to Mr. Bannon. And the second question first. Mr. Bannon, can you comment on the State of Union of from Mr. Trump? How can we not to become a social country with socialism? Can you address that for us?
So much. That is absolutely a terrific question. If you notice two things in the speech or the State of the Union, if you're able to see it in China on TV or on the internet, number one, you notice the many of the women in there dressed in all white. That all white is in homage to the suffragettes. Remember, the women have only had the right to vote as long as we've been a democracy. They've only had the right to vote for 100 years, and so this was kind of in honor of that. But it's also part of the resistance movement against Trump. Many of those women who were in the dressed in white were some of these young congresswomen who were just voted in the 2018 midterm, and they were voted in opposition to President Trump. So they are sitting in the audience, and you could see the tension kind of between President Trump as giving the speech and the resistance of these women, these female congressmen, and particularly the younger ones dressed in the white to honor the suffragette movement. Many of these, or some of these, I should say, particularly AOC or Ocasio-Cortez, who is this young, dynamic, she's a former bartender, right? Her last job was actually in a bar serving drinks as a bartender, but she's a tremendously dynamic young woman. She's only 27 years old. I think she has 17 million Twitter followers and has really become the voice of a young generation. She does Facebook Live, where she's at her house cooking her meal and talking to people about Congress, about the budget. She's really drawn a tremendous amount of young people into the process, and she stands absolutely opposed to everything President Trump stands for. One of the things is that Cortez, Bernie Sanders, many of these new people that vote into Congress actually are calling themselves democratic socialists. Democratic socialists. It's really the first time since the early 20th century that socialism has really come up as a concept or a topic in American politics in any way. President Trump finished the speech, I think, incredibly boldly. He took that on and addressed it directly and said, quote, "America will never become a socialist country." And there was a huge round of applause, including from many, many Democrats. As we go forward, it's one of the reasons I'm a populist. That what's happening here in politics in the United States, which is really happening in politics worldwide, you have a populism of the right and you have a populism of the left. The people on the populism of the left are socialist. They want more government involvement in the economy. They want more government involvement in your life. They want more government involvement in just about every aspect from cradle to grave. Populism on the right believes that power should be taken away from the elites and pressed down to the people, but we want less government control. We want more freedom. We particularly want the value of capitalism to start to come back to the people and just not be concentrated in the elite. It's those two forces, those conflicting forces, the Trump kind of populist right and the Cortez and Bernie Sanders left, that you saw in a perfect setting, in this traditional setting of the State of the Union, where you're in the beautiful Congress. You're right there in probably the most civic, sacred space we have in the United States, the House of Representatives, which is the people's house. And there you had this kind of very dramatic, it looked like 100 women all dressed in white, kind of like the Vestal Virgins, right? But it's an honor, it's an homage back to our 100 years, the suffragette movement, and they were just clashing directly with President Trump the entire speech.
Now, Mr. Bannon had answered Beijing ladies' talk, and I actually watched that State of Union, and he's great. Now, Khaleesi, in fact, today we wanted to actually talk to Khaleesi today. Khaleesi had two questions for Mr. Bannon. Now, that I think that the China CCP's suppression is not inferior to Hitler, Nazis, and then also that it is actually unforeseen before, and I think that it is beyond our imagination, the persecution. So, Mr. Trump, at the moment, it is launched so that, you think that what can Donald Trump help with China is trying to have a freedom of religion. Do you think Donald Trump can do something if we want to have freedom of religion?
Look, I think what the United States government, what President Trump's trying to do right now is an overall to try to, I think, get some balance in the Chinese, the CCP and the China official government in America's response. I have said that the Chinese CCP has been running an economic war against the United States in Western Europe, the industrial democracies, for 20 years. And I think many of the dissidents that have left mainland China and gone to the West and have been persecuted would agree with that this actually is a war. I think what President Trump's trying to do, and he said this in the State of the Union, is trying to work on an overall architecture of a deal to make sure there's some sort of balance going forward and some sort of massive structural reforms to the Chinese economy. Part of those reforms is to make sure that Chinese workers are taken care of. I think one of the big concerns in the West is that the Chinese workers are essentially treated like slaves. And that's one of the reasons that wages are so low in China, is that they're basically treated as almost a slave labor force, which is just not acceptable. I think that the religious part of it and the religious freedom, he does in his State Department with Mike Pompeo. This is the Secretary of State. It's a huge effort. There's a huge effort going on across the U.S. government. We just had the prayer breakfast this week in Washington, D.C. that the president went to. Sam Brownback, the former governor of Kansas, is the ambassador at large for religious freedom and religious liberty. I think it's going to be a huge aspect. One of the things that hurts us, and just to be brutally frank about it, is to have the Pope sign a deal with the CCP that essentially gives President Xi authority to approve the bishops. It's very tough it's very difficult for the United States government and for other people in the United States who really admire the Christians in China. Because I've said, and I gave this speech I think I told you about the other day, last Friday here in New York City, to talk about the persecutions of Christians and Catholics, specifically not just in the Middle East, but in China, and how the Chinese Christians are really, to me, heroes to the Catholic Church and to the Christian Church because of all the oppression that you've had to go through. So no, I think it's the United States is first going to try to sort its relationship out with China, try to get some balance to it. Obviously, the State Department and others are going after religious liberty. Ambassador Brownback. But one of the things we have to do, I think, is to absolutely, fight the Vatican and make sure the Vatican does not end up in cahoots with the CCP and really a junior partner to the CCP in the selection of church officials in China.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. Answer. There are a lot of people concerning about the religious issues. Now, Mr. Bannon, so if China-U.S. trade negotiation, one thing is that is talking about that no reform. But then the thing is that a lot of people, Mr. Trump in the State of Union talking about that China must have structural reform. So can you explain in the briefest time that U.S. wanted to have the structural reform in China? Does it mean that China must have a freedom, and also that is it be a political reform in China? Is it want China to have rule of law? Is that what that means?
I think this is what we're getting to. I think freedom in China is eventually going to come from. This is one of the reasons I think the democracy project hasn't quite gotten the traction. I think freedom in China is going to come from economic freedom first, and then political freedom will follow from that. Back in the early 2000s, people thought that partnering with China all of a sudden become more open, more free market capitalist, more democratic. That did not happen. In fact, it went the other direction. It went more totalitarian, more mercantilist, more closed. And now you've seen with the start of the social credit score, it's now become completely oppressive to the Chinese people. I think when we talk about structural reforms, what President Trump's talking about is structural reforms in state-owned industries and other aspects, kind of non-trade barriers. One of the reasons I think President Trump and the American government's trying to do this is that they understand that the CCP, one of the ways they get their cash is really off of these state-owned industries. And what it's trying to do is to open up these industries and make sure they compete globally with other industries. And part of that is that wages for Chinese people would rise. That one of the big aspects here and one of the big problems that the Chinese worker is paid so little versus the rest of the workers around the world is kind of deflated wages throughout the world, it's deflated prices throughout the world, and that has the capitalists and the materialists sell this as a great benefit to everybody. Really, it's a benefit to principally the people that benefit from those low wages are really the CCP and the other elites here in the United States. So I think that part of this, when you hear structural changes in China or the reformers in China, part of that is to make sure this reformation of Chinese industry, basic Chinese industry, is to focus on the well-being of workers, to focus on the well-being of the working people in China, and to make sure they can get better wages, and that the CCP can skim less cash off the top to kind of funnel into money laundering back here into the real estate in Midtown Manhattan.
So, Mr. Bannon answered this question. A lot of people still concerned about the questions such as like this. Sarah asked this question. Mr. Bannon, U.S., China, they are going to be met in Hainan, right? And if once the U.S.-China trade agreement signed, then CCP is going to continue with the lies. How is U.S. going to tackle with the lies? Would you be able to launch another Common People's campaign and then get the support of the other governments to support you to anti those lies, to break those lies?
Well, I think, look, Sarah, the key thing is that we got to counter these lies every day. I mean, one of the things that the Rule of Law Fund and others of your voice and the other people online is to counter these lies with the truth. I strongly believe that part of the trade agreement that will be done with the CCP will make sure that there's completely open and completely that you can understand and you completely get to the truth. I think it's also coming upon us. I think it's one of the reasons Miles has had such a huge impact in less than 2 years he's been here. We have to continue to do shows like this. You have to continue to do your shows. It's social media. It's just we've got to get the story out there, and we have to be relentless. We have to do it every day. We have to tell the story of the 500, right? The people that have disappeared, have been in prison. We also have to tell the stories every day about what the reality is in China, and it's just going to be incumbent upon us to tell it. So it's I don't think we can fall back and think about anybody but ourselves is going to do it. And hopefully in this whole process of the trade, I will tell you one thing, this entire negotiation of the trade agreement have brought so many things to light. I mean, the sophistication and understanding of the American people about what the real situation with CCP in China is at this level in the last 6 months to 9 months to a year, right? It's really grown exponentially. I think as soon as we get our hands around and are much more aggressive on things like Amanda Bennett and VOA, et cetera, we even get more of the truth out there. But it's going to be a tough fight, and we're just going to have to work it every day. I'd love to be able to, there's no magic wand we're going to be able to wave and then say it's all going to be better, because it's not. It doesn't work like that.
Karin question. Mr. Bannon can have a rest. Too many questions asking Mr. Bannon. So now it's a question for Karin. So many years that you've been in China. Anything that happened in China that makes you unhappy? Pollution, the fog. Several days, we have talked about the added value of China, materialism in China, CCP problem. But in China, but then every day you live in China, every day that the pollution affected us the most, particularly in those cosmopolitan such as Beijing, Tianjin, Heilongjiang, these areas, they were affected greatly by the fog and the air pollution. The people in the U.S. probably don't understand the severity of it.
Money laundering that is going on. What really influences people's lives every single day is pollution. It didn't, when I first started in China, it was more than 7 years ago, it was not really like that. And I could see the process, I could see how things changed. Take your phone. You can do the experiment right now. You take your phone, you look at the weather forecast of any city in the world. You can see it's sunny, it's cloudy, it's snowing, it's raining. Now download any city of China, and they have a special section for pollution to tell you how polluted the city is on that very day. Now, before talking about money, before talking about investments, people don't have clean air to breathe. Now, we've been through this with the Industrial Revolution 300 years ago in the UK, so we know what it means. But being there and not being able to lead a normal life just because you don't have fresh air is terrifying. So that was one of the things that would influence my life on a daily basis. Like I like running, I like exercising. There were days that I would literally faint. So it's not what you see on TV that people are just randomly wearing masks to protect themselves. It's worse, and it's a lot worse. People, the rich, the high level people, they are buying oxygen cans like we buy Coke, Sprite. They buy oxygen cans from Canada, fresh air. So imagine how bad the air quality is, and imagine how ordinary people can survive and are able to survive under those circumstances and under that kind of environment. That is absolutely awful.
A lot of friends, many questions, and we have only 10 minutes, so we can only choose several questions to ask. Someone asked Mr. Bannon, particularly, this question. Mr. Bannon, would you please tell us the international situation? Internationally, they understand the threat presented by the CCP. And on March 20th, Vatican, however, would need to give this a magic wand to the CCP, let them to authorize their own bishop. What kind of action you going to take if that happened?
Yeah, I think the international situation is that, remember, with One Belt, One Road, the Chinese, the CCP has been going all the way out through India, through the subcontinent, through South Asia, to sub-Saharan Africa, now to South America. It's one of the reasons that Bolsonaro won in Brazil, was this CCP really taking the British East India Company predatory capitalism model and perpetuating it throughout the world. In Europe and in the Middle East, but particularly in Europe and Eastern Europe, the CCP's coming, spreading a lot of money around. I mean, they're offering to build infrastructure projects, they're offering to build telecommunications projects. You know, one of the questions gets to be, why is that money not being reinvested in China? You know, where are the jobs for the Chinese when you have the unemployment and underemployment that you have in China? How come that money's not being spent back there? No, so I think the international community, particularly these individual nations, are just waking up to the fact that when the CCP comes offering dollars, it's really kind of this predatory capitalism where they're going to lend you this money for these infrastructure projects that could take forever to pay it back, and they take more and more control. So that's beginning to come to full fruition. I think the aspect of the church's involvement with the CCP has to really be investigated. One of the things I'm trying to do is kick off a conference actually in Rome, where we bring together people from throughout the world to discuss this, about what are the details of this, and particularly what we would do in the conference. The first half a day would just be to go through the persecution of Christians and Catholics in China. That has not been done in Rome. No one's actually had a conference where we've brought dissidents, we've brought people that have been persecuted, and lay out right there for the Vatican to see that, hey, you can't look away from this situation. You cannot look away from the fact that the Chinese people, and particularly Chinese Christians and Catholics, have been persecuted. So there's a lot of work to be done. The one thing I can tell you is that when people see the details and the truth, and this is the power of facts and the power of truth, I haven't met any government officials in any country that are not shocked when they step back and see what's actually happened to the working men and women, the common man, you know, old 100 names in China. And they're getting more and more concerned. Once those facts are presented, people are starting to wake up. I think it's been one of the great values of having Miles Kwok here in the United States, and particularly somebody with Miles's dynamic personality, but also his resources and his personality and his fearlessness was able to, remember, there are not many people that would have the financial sophistication to understand H&A, also understand how the Chinese Communist Party at the highest levels worked, plus their influence peddling operation in the West that could combine that into what Miles did with H&A, which was really the thing that kind of broke this open and really made people start to think about it as they look at all these scandals. Politicians and government leaders throughout the world, when they see the facts, they are shocked. And not only are they shocked, they don't want to be involved with it. And here's why they don't want to be involved with it. They understand the day of accounting and the day of reckoning is coming. And they don't want to be on the wrong side of history. They don't want to be looked at. They realize that they're going to have very short political lives if it looks like at a certain point in time They were taking money from basically the same equivalent of the Nazis and oppressing their people. And so, and the one thing is this social credit score, as this technology and artificial intelligence and facial recognition and biotechnology comes to oppress the Chinese more, you're going to get more and more government officials, I think, throughout the world saying, hey, we really don't want to have anything to do with this. And so it is an effort. It's got to be done every day. And you've got to, because remember, the countervailing force is they're coming with the ability to write a big check. And you've seen the corruption here in the United States. You've seen the corruption throughout. One of the things people in China should take as a real bellwether is in Brazil, where the CCP was spreading tons of money to the socialist government down there and really crony capitalism, that Captain Bolsonaro, when he ran, one of the big aspects of his victory that has not been reported in the media, but one of the big aspects that resonated with the Brazilian people was CCP really coming in and owning big chunks of Brazil. And the Brazilians say, hey, we don't mind having Chinese as investors. We don't mind having individual Chinese companies. We want partnerships. We want to access China. But we don't want CCP coming in and owning owning our resources and then being able to control our politicians. You've seen that now turning in Australia. You've seen it turning in Brazil. Europe is still a big battleground for this, and it's going to have to be something that's going to be talked about and discussed, I think, over the coming years. But I would tell the people in China, the more facts that come out, the more politicians throughout the world start to back off.
非常感谢班农先生。
And very thankful, Mr. Bannon, very clear, a lot of people asking the same question. Now, another question. Now that many questions, they are concerning about, particularly now, they worry about the United States position because internal political pressure because of the Democrat and the Republican may be used by the CCP because the CCP can use the pendulum's effect. You know, they are creating conflict between the Democrats and the GOP, and in fact, such conflict is going to be bad for the United States. So in the past 50 years, and then China CCP used this kind of a uncertainty, political uncertainty, and then to create a lot of lies, you know, and then because every time that they make a promise to one party, the other party can altogether go against it, right? So now that they're creating such conflict between these two parties and also creating the weakening situation for President Trump. And so the situation is being used by the CCP, and the CCP think that okay, that you want our support, that you need to get to the agree with us in the negotiation. So there are too many questions now, but then there are a couple of questions we can ask, and because tomorrow Mr. Bannon, he's not going to come to our program, and because tonight Mr. Bannon is going to have meeting with Washington and then with other European leaders. So we're going to ask the question today, particularly questions from Hong Kong. I know that Hong Kong, friends from Hong Kong, you have made the donation to the Rule of Law Fund. In fact, that we don't know who is making the donation, but I know that the Hong Kong friend that you made this donation. I may not have told Mr. Bannon. I'm going to tell Mr. Bannon later on about the donation, okay? And we're going to write the report. Now, your question is this. For Mr. Bannon, that Hong Kong, all the tycoons were controlled by the CCP. And all of the rich people, each family in Hong Kong, each of the rich family in Hong Kong, they have a political committee member in the Politburo and the National Congress. So, but the thing is that China is basically taking control of Hong Kong, and then using the businessmen to help them, and to betray Hong Kong, and including Hong Kong, the head of Hong Kong, the police force, and they are also working for the CCP, because in Hong Kong that they are arresting a lot of the Mao Squad supporters, and then they are actually arresting a lot of the people who are supported Mao Squad, and also seize the Mao Squad's property. So the kleptocrat, they are very dangerous. So Mr. Bannon, what kind of action you can take to help Hong Kong and to prosecute the Hong Kong police force because they are violating the rule of law? What kind of action we can take?
Specific action, we have to bring this up in front of the whole world. I think the world right now does not have a grasp on exactly what's going on in Hong Kong. They want to look the other way. And they don't realize it's this kind of merger like it is here with the elites working with the CCP, hand in glove. In Hong Kong, Hong Kong has become so repressive, so incredibly repressive from what it used to be. What we have to do, I believe, is go back and support those people in Hong Kong that are saying, hey, the deal was the deal in 1997. That deal was supposed to be unwavering. It was a highly negotiated, got negotiated for 10 years. One country, two systems, right? And that second system was based upon Western rule of law. And that's what the Hong Kong people bought into. That's what every aspect of Hong Kong society and the international community bought into. That is being flaunted every day. And it's being used to oppress the Chinese people. I think we have to call out, and I think we have to do it consistently, those tycoons and those moguls in Hong Kong that are working with CCP and allowing the police to act as the stability force is in mainland China, to act as a stability force to terrorize the free people of Hong Kong. Look, Hong Kong's been a beacon of freedom and a beacon of entrepreneurial success now for 100 years, and I think we've got to revert back to that. We have to do it, I think, quickly, because I actually fear for Hong Kong more than really Taiwan right now. As much as I fear for Taiwan, I think they're trying to close down Hong Kong and really put the word out that if people and businessmen who are dissidents who don't agree with the CCP fly back into Hong Kong, they can be rounded up, and I think that's got to stop, and I think we've got to stop having their assets confiscated.
Very thankful, Mr. Bannon. And Hong Kong issue, a lot of people are very concerned, particularly the people invested in Hong Kong. And Hong Kong has become the money laundering base for the CCP. And they have exported at fake RMB for CCP to the US. And a lot of people telling us that CCP have planned and utilize the Hong Kong currency pact with the US, and they are going to create the disaster calamity situation for the US currency. And it is because Hong Kong currency pact with the US, and then also at the certain time that the Hong Kong currency is going to work together with the RMB to take over the US currency and to create a chaos for the US currency. You must urge the U.S. people help Hong Kong, and so that they're not turning Hong Kong to become the puppet of China. You must do something. Can you tell us what you think?
Well, I think it's very important. I think it gets back to the heart of this thing, is that we can allow Hong Kong to have its rights taken. And I think that there are many international financial institutions that the money goes through Hong Kong that can be held accountable. I mean, the Hong Kong, when you say the CCP uses Hong Kong as the money laundering center to the West, right? And I also think Macau is part of that also. But let's talk about Hong Kong. Is that's the money laundering center? Remember, that's done in conjunction with financial institutions. I think it's incumbent upon us, a rule of law, is to start to call that out and start to force that into the legal system, because really Hong Kong can't exist unless it's bolted hard into the financial system of the West. Remember, essentially the Chinese banks are kind of segregated out the SWIFT system, whereas the banks in Hong Kong principally, I believe, are connected. And that's one of our leverage points, but it's something that's got to be brought up. It's one of the things, trust me, the financial press in London, in the United States, want to put their head in the sand. They don't want to look at this, right? Because people are making money, right? As long as people are making money, they don't care, right? They really don't care how it's made. And I think it's incumbent upon the Rule of Law Fund and also other dissident, wealthy, high net individuals who are their wealth being confiscated and they're actually being put in prison. I think also have to come and put their shoulder to the wheel for full transparency. If you have transparency in Hong Kong, you're going to be able to get back to the 1997 agreement, which was one country, two systems.
非常感谢班农先生。
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. A lot of our Hong Kong friends, you must understand that Mr. Bannon's support of Hong Kong. Now, we wish that perhaps add more time because there are so many questions for you, Mr. Bannon. Perhaps that you can drink some water. If you need to go to the bathroom, you can go. But we are going to add some time here today because tomorrow you're not coming to join us. So now let us ask Ms. Karin some question. Now, people from the 90s ask you a question, Karin. Online, a lot of people they are selling their own body online. It is very popular in China, and you spend time in China. For the girls in China, they just sell their own body. They became the online prostitute, and then in fact that they're selling themselves to a lot of Chinese government officials. What do you see this?
听说过，就
I heard about that.
who was very active in the internet. He was a very, very modern Chinese guy. So whatever was most popular at that time, whatever was happening on the internet, he would tell me. He would just report. He would tell me, you know, this is happening in China. What do you think of this? What do you think of that? I heard of that. Now, I have to say that unfortunately, this is not just happening in China. It's not just a Chinese phenomenon. It started in Europe many years ago. Well, it's a phenomenon that has always existed since the beginning of time. Now, what we're talking about right now is that with the enhancement of technology, with the development of the society, this is just getting worse. Now, what I can say to Chinese people, but I would say exactly the same to Europeans, to Americans, to any other person who is doing the same. Your body is worth, and you as a person are worth. If you start selling yourself, and usually most of the time people are especially girls, are selling themselves very cheap, it means that you don't believe in yourself. You are letting other people decide for you, and you are letting other people know that you don't really care about your own being, and they can do whatever they want with you. So I would say this to the Chinese public, but I would say exactly the same to the European and to the Americans. And this is not a matter of religion. This is not a matter of being Catholic, of being traditional, of being. It's not at all. It's just a matter of being respectful to yourself.
谢谢凯琳啊。
Thank you, Karin. Very good. The last question to Mr. Bannon. So many questions, too many. But all the questions for Mr. Bannon, I cannot possibly ask him because he is going to return to Washington, D.C. and time is up. And his girlfriend is waiting for him to take lunch, you know. And so last question is that very critical question. Mr. Bannon, would you please objectively, straightforwardly comment on the conversation you had with Wang Qishan? What do you think about his image? And then he met you with several hours. He talked with you, and also that he is he wore his pajamas meeting you, and then took off his tie, and then compared with that he was giving speech in Davos. So, and then he presented a just person, a kind image. But you personally, how would you describe or comment on Wang Qishan? And also, he owned properties in the U.S. and then also his family owned properties in the U.S. Do you think RICO Act can actually prosecute them? Can you answer this last question?
Yeah, I think, look, the key aspect of this is that you don't get to be a leader of the CCP unless you're an important figure on the world stage. I mean, you've got, Michael Bloomberg in Singapore introducing Wan Xishan as the #1 most powerful political leader in the world. He just got back. Wan Xishan gave the keynote address at Davos, as I said yesterday, I think 10 days ago, in which the world's media, including the Financial Times of London and every one of the, this is the top financial paper in the world. Wan Xishan was on the front page. So he is lauded throughout the world. And he wasn't described there as the leader of the, oppression of the Chinese people. He was lauded as the head of the anti-corruption effort. If you go to any of the major newspapers in the world, the Times of London, the New York Times, they don't really talk about the effort he's doing. When you're at President Xi and Li He and Wan Xishan's level, you've already become a player in the international stage. What it's important to us to do is to start to show the reality. I think the H&A investigation alone shows that there's this ownership, and there's been lies about the ownership of one of the most significant financial companies in the world. The way that we're going to counter the Wan Xishans of the world is not by having opinions and not by writing opinion pieces, not by giving our critiques on shows. What it's going to be able to do is to go in to certain levels and to prove, and I think here in an American court, in this defamation suit against you, to prove what the facts are, and then to tie that to the demise of the chairman and CEO of H&A, and to do that across the board, to do that to an outbound insurance company, to do it to a Huawei. Once you make those connections, the world's media can't look away, because they want to look away because what they're doing is making money, right? This city and back, the reason that real estate prices are starting to drop, they're down 20% in 1 year, is that there's much tighter restrictions on Chinese and Russian money flowing into Midtown Manhattan to buy these properties because of the work of people like Miles Kwok and others to expose the fact that money's being laundered through here, stolen from the Chinese people and laundered through here. So to me, it's very practical. You can say that Wan Xishan's a devil. You can say the newspapers say he's a saint. That's the most significant financial mind in the world. The people that are opposed to him say that he's a really bad guy doing terrible things to the Chinese people. One side's going to win and one side's going to lose. There's no middle ground here. And the way that I think we're going to win is to expose this. Now, whether that gets taken up under criminal aspects in the American legal system or in the system in Europe, that's all to be seen. But you've got to prove the facts first and then go. There are many, many techniques, including RICO, which I talked about on New Year's Eve, that can be used in these situations. But at first, you've got to start getting some facts out there and tie things together. Remember, this is all about a process. Miles Kwok and others like Miles were all laughed and ridiculed less than 2 years ago when this all started. They were considered cranks, they were considered fools, they were considered liars, they were considered bullshit artists, right? Crazy, right? A little bit like Breitbart was at the beginning of the Trump revolution. Well, Trump's in the Oval Office today, right? And they're not laughing anymore, they're crying, okay? The same thing with, this whole dissident and the social media of Mr. Luda and Sarah and our new questioner today, Kalishi and others. The hundreds and hundreds and hundreds that Karin talked about, hundreds if not thousands of young people on social media that are retweeting this, etc., is the key to this. But like I said, one side's going to win and one side's going to lose. And what we have to do every day is to do this and to expose. If you want to stop Michael Bloomberg from going to Singapore and getting on a stage and announcing Wan Xishan as the most significant political figure in the world, and having the people at Davos invite him a couple of months later, and they're all adoring crowd, right, of all the biggest money managers and hedge fund managers in the world, to introduce him as the most genius financial brain in the world, then the way to do that is investigations. The way to do that is exposure. And so the burden is on us now. We know what the mission is. The burden is on us to go do it. As Miles says, this is the year of action. So kind of, is like I say to Wan Xishan, game on.
Thank you, Mr. Bannon. And in such a busy time, and she consecutively sitting with us and broadcasting with us. And, he stayed in New York City for several days, and so God's gift to us. and God gives to us such a great friend, and our beautiful Karin. And even though that she is shaking, she's nervous, she still be talking and gave us wonderful, telling us wonderful insight.
Boyfriends. That's-
我希望他回。
And then, so she is not going to cry, okay, when she get home. And then, Mr. Bannon, and you will be safe. And then also, we now telling Wang Qishan that he's game on. And so, Wang Qishan, and they are going to, probably going to do something to you. So you must keep yourself safe, okay? And Mr. Bannon, you must really take care of your own safety, because Meng Jianzhu, Wang Qishan, they are ruthless. They are very daring. They do anything. And you see, because that they can actually make use a lot of the vested interest people then to harm you. And so, and of course that in London, in Hong Kong, a lot of people actually scared of Wang Qishan, not Xi Jinping. The people do most harm is Wang Qishan, not Xi Jinping. So today, but anyway, today we are concluding our show. We give Mr. Bannon and Karin the greatest applause to show our gratitude to them to share their time with us. Thank you very much. And today our broadcasting is great, and Mr. Bannon again to create the momentum in our history, and also that the Karin, with risking your personal safety, you talk to us, and it's wonderful. Next year today, and CCP is really going to face such crisis, or perhaps they were already disappeared. But anyway, a lot of questions we cannot continue to ask, and we will continue to explore those questions with Mr. Bannon. So everything just the beginning. 2019 is the time that we will get rid of the CCP, and that we really must take action and action and action. Thank you very much. And then I am going to shake your hand, Mr. Bannon, for all the ladies in the East. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And goodbye.